Aria Thorne's hand shot out in pure desperation, fingers closing around the stranger's wrist like a lifeline in a storm. She didn't look at his face, didn't see the danger carved into his features or the way the crowd suddenly fell silent. All she knew was the predator closing in behind her and the gamble she'd just made. "Please," she whispered, pulling herself against him. "Just play along." The stranger's eyes, dark as midnight, cold as winter steel, dropped to where her hand gripped his arm. Then something shifted in his expression, something that made her blood run cold. If you want to see how a desperate lie changes an entire kingdom, stay until the end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from, and don't forget to hit that like button. This story gets intense. The frontier market at Greystone Cross smelled like wet fur, wood smoke, and desperation. It always did on trade nights, when the moon hung fat and silver over the borderlands and wolves from a dozen territories came to barter, threaten, and pretend at civilization. Lanterns swung from rope lines strung between crooked posts, casting shadows that moved like living things across faces both human and not. Aria Thorne kept her head down, her hood pulled low, and her hands buried deep in the pockets of a coat that had seen better decades. She moved through the crowd with the practiced invisibility of someone who'd learned young that being noticed meant being hurt. Around her, voices rose and fell in a dozen dialects: coastal drawl, mountain growl, the clipped precision of city packs who thought themselves better than everyone else. She wasn't here to trade. She had nothing left to trade. The remnants of the Thornwood pack, 17 souls when the raiders came, 5 now, had sent her with their last few coins to buy medicine. Real medicine, not the hedge witch remedies they'd been choking down for weeks. Old Magda's fever wouldn't break, and little Sarah's cough had started bringing up blood. If Aria didn't come back with something that worked, they'd be down to 3 by winter's end. No pressure. She'd almost made it to the herbalist's stall when she felt it, that electric prickle between her shoulder blades that meant predator eyes had found prey. Aria's step faltered. Her fingers tightened around the coins in her pocket until the edges bit into her palm. She didn't turn around. Turning around would confirm she knew, would show weakness, would invite the hunt. But the feeling didn't fade. Slowly, carefully, she angled toward a stall selling iron trinkets, using the shift to glance back. Her heart dropped into her stomach like a stone down a well. Marcus Vane, of course it was Marcus fucking Vane. He stood half a market length away, his bulk blocking the flow of traffic like a boulder in a stream. People moved around him without complaint, because people who valued their skin didn't complain when Marcus Vane planted himself somewhere. He was tall, broad, with the kind of muscle that came from years of taking what he wanted and beating down anyone who objected. His pack, the Iron Claw, controlled 3 territories now, swallowed up in the chaos after the border wars, and Marcus was their enforcer, their weapon, their terror made flesh. He was also the man who'd asked for Aria's hand in a marriage alliance 6 months ago, when the Thornwood pack still had something worth taking. She'd said no. He'd said she'd regret it. Apparently tonight was regret night. Marcus met her eyes across the crowd and smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a cat that had just spotted a mouse with a broken leg. He started walking toward her, not hurrying, because he didn't need to hurry. Where was she going to go? Out into the wildlands alone? Back to her pathetic excuse for a pack hiding in the ruins of a burned-out settlement? Aria's mind raced. The crowd was thick, but not thick enough to lose him. He knew this market as well as she did, probably better. She could scream, but who would help her? The Iron Claw had reach, had power, had the kind of reputation that made people look the other way when inconvenient things happened. And she was nobody. A survivor from a dead pack with no allies, no leverage, no... Her hand shot out. It wasn't a plan. Plans required thought, and there wasn't time for thought. It was pure animal instinct, the desperate flailing of a creature with its leg in a trap. Her fingers closed around the first solid thing they found, a man's wrist, muscled and warm beneath the sleeve of a dark coat. She yanked herself close to him, pressing against his side like they were together, like this was normal, like she had every right to be there. "Please," she whispered, not looking at his face, every word tumbling out in a breathless rush. "Just play along. There's a man following me, and I just need him to think I'm with someone. Please. I'll owe you. I'll pay you. Just for a minute. Just..." The stranger went very, very still. It was the kind of stillness that prey animals recognize on an instinctual level. The stillness of a hunter who's just noticed you've walked into his den. Aria's words died in her throat. Slowly, with a creeping horror that started in her gut and spread outward like poison, she became aware of several things at once. First, the crowd around them had stopped moving, not slowed. Stopped, frozen mid-step, mid-word, mid-breath. Second, the noise of the market, that constant background roar of voices and footsteps and commerce, had dropped to a whisper, then to nothing at all. Third, the hand she was gripping belonged to someone who smelled like winter mountains, and old stone, and something else, something that made her wolf want to tuck its tail and roll over in submission. And fourth, Marcus Vane, who'd been walking toward her with such confident menace 30 seconds ago, had stopped dead in the middle of the market. The color had drained from his face like water from a broken cup. As Aria watched, he dropped to one knee, then the other, his head bowed, his shoulders hunched. He looked, in that moment, like a man who'd just realized he was kneeling at the edge of his own grave. "Oh," Aria heard herself say very faintly. "Oh no." The stranger turned his head to look at her. She'd grabbed Cale Draven, the Alpha King, the Wolf Lord of the Seven Territories. The man who'd unified the borderlands through a combination of strategic brilliance, ruthless pragmatism, and a willingness to do things that made hardened warriors wake up screaming. The man whose word was law from the southern ashlands to the frozen north, whose power was so absolute that packs fought wars just to earn his attention, whose presence at this market was impossible. Completely, utterly impossible. The Alpha King didn't come to Greystone Cross. The Alpha King didn't shop at frontier markets with the common rabble. The Alpha King was a distant figure, a name invoked in threats and prayers, not a physical man you could accidentally grab in a crowd because you were running from a marriage proposal gone bad. Except apparently he did. And he was. And she had. Cale Draven looked to be in his early 30s, though with wolves of real power, age was always a guess. His face was all hard angles and sharp edges, like someone had carved him from granite and forgotten to smooth the corners. Dark hair, pulled back and tied at his neck. Eyes the color of storm clouds over deep water. A jaw that looked like it could break iron. And an expression of such perfect, icy calm that Aria couldn't tell if he was about to laugh or rip her throat out. "Well," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled, with an accent she couldn't quite place. Something northern, maybe, or mountain bred. "This is unexpected." Aria's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Her brain had apparently decided this was a great time to shut down entirely and leave her to die. "What's your name?" Cale asked, still in that same conversational tone, like they were discussing the weather and not her imminent, extremely messy death. Aria," she managed. "Aria Thorne. I'm sorry, I didn't know it was... I was just running from him." Cale's gaze shifted to Marcus Vane, who was still kneeling in the dirt, head down, not moving. "Marcus Vane of the Ironclaw. I know you. You took the Riverside territory last spring, killed the Alpha, scattered his pack, claimed the land." "Yes, my lord." Marcus's voice was steady, but Aria could see the sweat beading on his forehead from here. "By right of challenge, it was done according to the old laws." "It was." Cale's expression didn't change. "And now you're hunting this woman through a neutral market. Also according to the old laws?" Silence. "I asked you a question, Marcus." Marcus swallowed hard. "She dishonored my offer of alliance, my lord. I came to discuss terms." "Discuss." Cale repeated the word like he was tasting something rotten. "Is that what we're calling it now?" He looked back at Aria. His eyes were impossible to read. "Did you dishonor his offer?" "I said no," Aria said. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. Maybe because she'd already accepted she was going to die tonight, so she might as well die honest. "He wanted a marriage alliance. I wasn't interested. That's not dishonor. That's just no." Cale studied her for a long moment. Then he looked back at Marcus. "Stand up." Marcus rose slowly, like a man expecting a blow. "The woman's under my protection now," Cale said. "You will leave this market. You will not follow her, speak to her, or send anyone else to do either of those things. You will consider your offer permanently declined. Are we clear?" My lord, we, clear, Moti. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Aria felt the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Somewhere in the crowd, someone made a small, frightened sound. Marcus Vane, enforcer, killer, terror of 3 territories, bowed his head. Yes, my lord, crystal clear. Good, go. He went, fast. The crowd parted around him like water around a stone, and then he was gone, disappeared into the shadows at the market's edge, and Aria was alone with the man whose arm she was still gripping like an idiot. She let go, stepped back. Thank you, she said. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I'll just walk with me. It wasn't a request. Kael turned and started walking, not looking back to see if she followed. Aria stood frozen for exactly 3 seconds, weighing her options. Stay here and maybe get murdered by Marcus's friends later. Run and definitely get hunted down by the Alpha King's people for disrespecting him. Or follow, and at least delay the consequences for a few more minutes. She followed. The crowd melted away in front of them. People pressed themselves against stalls, ducked into alleyways, suddenly remembered urgent business in the opposite direction. No one met Kael's eyes. No one spoke. Aria felt like she was walking through a dream or a nightmare where all the normal rules had stopped applying. He led her away from the main market down a narrow path between 2 buildings into a small courtyard that probably served as a loading area during the day. Now it was empty except for a few stacked crates and a water trough. Quiet. Private. Great. Perfect place for a discreet murder. Kael stopped, turned to face her, leaned back against the wall with his arms crossed. Tell me about your pack, he said. Aria blinked. What? Your pack. The Thornwood, if I'm remembering correctly. You said your name was Thorn. He tilted his head slightly. Small settlement, eastern borderlands, near the Whispering Forest. Your alpha was Elena Thorn? My mother. The words came out flat. She's dead. I know, raiders about 8 months ago. 47 casualties. Settlement burned. His voice was matter-of-fact, reciting information like he was reading from a report. You survived. How many others? 4. Aria's hands curled into fists at her sides. 4 others. We're hiding in what's left of the old granary. We've got 1 rifle, half a box of shells, and enough food to last maybe another 3 weeks if we're careful. Is this the part where you offer condolences? Because I don't need them. I need medicine, Kael finished, for the sick ones. That's why you're here tonight. She stared at him. How do you... You moved through that market like someone on a mission. Didn't stop to look at anything except the herbalist's stall. You're carrying coins in your right pocket. I heard them when you grabbed me. And you're desperate enough to gamble on a complete stranger rather than let Marcus Vane corner you, which means you can't afford to waste time dealing with him. He shrugged. Not complicated. Aria felt something hot and ugly rising in her chest. You know about my pack. You knew we were raided. You knew how many died. And you did nothing. Correct. That's it? Just correct? Her voice was rising now, and she didn't care. 8 months of grief and rage and helplessness were bubbling up like poison from a lanced wound. You're the Alpha King. You're supposed to protect the territories. That's the whole fucking point of you, isn't it? We pay tribute, we follow the laws, and in return you keep us safe from exactly the kind of thing that happened to us. But when the raiders came, where were you? Where were your soldiers, your enforcers, your... Dealing with 17 other crises across 7 territories. Kael's voice cut through her tirade like a blade. Not loud, but sharp enough to draw blood. There was a border dispute in the north that nearly turned into a war. A plague outbreak in the coastal packs that killed 300. A rogue alpha in the mountains who was taking slaves. I have finite resources and infinite problems, and I make choices about where to deploy them based on population, strategic importance, and available intelligence. So we didn't matter enough. Aria laughed, and it sounded broken even to her own ears. We were too small, too remote, too... Yes. The word hit her like a slap. She'd expected excuses, justifications, the kind of political double talk that powerful people use to avoid taking responsibility. She hadn't expected agreement. Kael pushed off the wall, took a step toward her. You're right to be angry. Your pack was small, isolated, with no strategic value and no political connections. The raiders who hit you were a splinter group from a clan I'd already broken. I didn't know they were still operating in that region until the reports came in. By the time I got the intelligence, it was too late. Your people were dead. Your settlement was ash. There was nothing to save and no one to punish. The raiders had already moved on. So yes, I made a choice. I used my resources elsewhere. And your pack paid the price. Aria felt tears burning in her eyes and hated herself for it. You're supposed to lie. You're supposed to tell me you're sorry, that it won't happen again, that I don't lie. Kale's eyes were still storm gray, still unreadable. And I am sorry for whatever that's worth to you. But sorry doesn't bring your people back. Sorry doesn't protect the ones you have left. You need something more useful than my regret. Like what? The question came out bitter. An apology card? Thoughts and prayers? Like protection, actual protection. A place in the mountain fortress for you and your survivors. Medical care. Food. Training, if you want it. A voice in the council meetings when I'm deciding how to allocate resources so that next time someone's there to argue for the small packs. He paused. And a chance to hunt down the raiders who destroyed your home. Aria's breath caught. What? We found them 2 months ago. They're in a camp in the Gray Hills about 40 miles from here. I was planning to deal with them anyway. They've hit 3 more settlements since yours. But if you want to be there when it happens, you can be. I'll even give you the first strike, if that's what you need. It was everything she dreamed about in the long dark nights in the granary. Revenge, justice, the chance to make the monsters who'd killed her family pay in blood and screams. She could almost taste it, the satisfaction of watching them die, of knowing she'd been the one to... Why? She asked. Kale raised an eyebrow. Why what? Why would you do any of this? You said it yourself. I'm nobody. My pack doesn't matter. We're not strategic. We're not important. We're just 5 survivors in a burned-out granary. So why offer me protection, a voice, revenge? What's in it for you? For the first time since she'd grabbed his arm, something that might have been a smile touched Kyle's mouth. It wasn't a warm smile, but it was something. Because you grabbed my arm in the middle of a market and demanded I play along, he said, and in that moment you weren't afraid of me. You were afraid of Marcus Vane, yes, but not of me. You didn't know who I was, didn't care who I was. You just saw someone who might help, and you took the chance. He tilted his head. I've ruled these territories for 12 years. In that time, I've had thousands of people kneel to me, beg from me, plot against me, try to use me. But no one, not one person, has ever just grabbed me and asked me to pretend to be their partner to escape a bad marriage proposal. It was refreshing. I'm so glad my desperation was entertaining for you. It wasn't entertainment, it was honesty. The kind of raw, unfiltered honesty I almost never see because everyone's too busy calculating how to manipulate me. He took another step closer. You said something true tonight, Aria Thorne. You said I failed your pack. And you're right. I did. I make those calculations every day. Who to save, who to sacrifice, where to send my people, where to pull them back. I've made peace with the fact that I can't save everyone. But maybe I've made too much peace with it. Maybe I've gotten too comfortable with the math of letting people die. So I'm what, your conscience? Your reminder to care about the little people? Aria shook her head. I don't want to be your redemption project. Good, because that's not what I'm offering. Kale's voice dropped lower, more serious. I'm offering you a job. I need someone who'll stand in council meetings and tell me when I'm wrong. Someone who doesn't have a political agenda, doesn't owe favors to anyone, and isn't afraid to call me out when I'm making decisions that sacrifice people for strategy. Someone who remembers what it costs when the Alpha King decides you're not worth saving. He paused. You've earned the right to be that person, if you want it. Aria wanted to say no. Every instinct she had screamed that accepting help from someone this powerful was dangerous, that debts to kings came with prices you couldn't pay, that she should run now while she still could. But those same instincts had kept her alive this long, and right now they were also telling her that she was out of options. Her pack was dying. She was dying, and this man, this cold, calculating, impossibly powerful man, was offering her a way out. Not a good way, not a safe way, but a way. If I say yes, she said slowly, what happens to my people? They come with you. Tonight, if possible. We'll send a squad to collect them from the granary, bring them to the fortress, get them medical attention. Kale's tone was all business now. The sick ones will be treated. The healthy ones can decide if they want to stay or go elsewhere. You'll have rooms in the residential wing, access to supplies, protection under my authority. In return, you serve on the advisory council and speak your mind when it matters. That's it? That's the whole deal? That's the whole deal. You're not asking me to swear loyalty, join your pack formally, give up my independence? No. Kale's expression was unreadable again. You can leave whenever you want. Take your people and go. I'm not interested in keeping prisoners or forcing loyalty. But I think you'll find that leaving is harder than you expect once you're there. Not because I'll stop you, because you'll finally have the resources to do something about the things that make you angry. He smiled that cold smile again. And I think you have a lot of things that make you angry. He wasn't wrong. Okay, Aria said. The word felt like jumping off a cliff. Okay, yes, we'll come. Good. Kael nodded once, decisive. I'll send... But I have conditions. He stopped, raised an eyebrow. You're negotiating now? You said I earned the right to speak my mind. I'm speaking it. Aria lifted her chin. First condition. You send people to get my pack tonight. Not tomorrow, not next week. Tonight. I don't trust Marcus Vane to just forget about me, and I don't want to leave them unprotected for another day. Agreed. What else? Second, when you go after those raiders, I'm there, front line. Not watching from the back, not helping with planning. I want to see their faces when they realize they're about to die. Agreed. And third? Aria hesitated. This one was harder, more personal. But if she was going to do this, if she was going to walk into the Alpha King's fortress and pretend she belonged there, she needed to know. Third, she said, you tell me the truth. Always. No political double talk, no convenient omissions, no protecting me from the harsh realities of how you run things. If I'm going to advise you, I need to actually understand what you're doing and why, even if it's ugly, even if it makes me hate you. Kale studied her for a long moment. That's a dangerous thing to ask for. I don't care. You should. There are things I've done that would give you nightmares, choices I've made that would make you question whether I deserve to lead anything at all. His voice was soft, but there was something dark underneath it, something old and tired and stained with blood. If I tell you the truth about everything, you'll learn exactly what kind of monster I can be. Then I'll learn, Aria said. But I'll learn it honestly. Deal? For a long moment he didn't answer. Then, slowly, he extended his hand. Deal. She took it. His grip was warm, strong, calloused from weapons and work. For a second, she felt that same strange electric awareness she'd felt when she grabbed his arm. That sense of leashed power, of something wild barely contained beneath the surface. Then he let go and the moment passed. Wait here, Kale said. I'll arrange transport for your people and send someone to collect you. We'll have you at the fortress by dawn. Just like that? Just like that. He turned to leave, then paused, looked back at her. One more thing, Aria Thorne. That man you grabbed in the market? The one who played along with your desperate gamble? What about him? He doesn't exist anymore. The moment you accepted my offer, you stopped dealing with a convenient stranger and started dealing with the Alpha King, which means everything changes. The rules are different, the stakes are higher, and the people who want to hurt me will absolutely try to use you to do it. His eyes were very serious. So if you're having second thoughts, now's the time to say so. Because once we walk out of this courtyard together, there's no going back to pretending you're nobody. Aria thought about the granary, about old Magda's fever and Sarah's bloody cough, about the cold, hungry nights and the constant fear and the slow, grinding certainty that they were going to die in that ruined building, forgotten and alone. She thought about Marcus Vane's smile and the raiders who'd burned her home and all the other predators out there who preyed on the weak because they could. I stopped being nobody the night my pack burned, she said. I just didn't have the power to do anything about it until now. Kale nodded. Then welcome to the fortress, Aria Thorne. Try not to die too quickly. I have a feeling you're going to be interesting." He walked away, disappearing into the shadows between buildings, and Aria was alone in the courtyard with her racing heart and her dangerous new future, and the strangest sensation that she'd just made either the best decision of her life or the worst, probably both, knowing her luck. She leaned against the wall, let her head fall back, and tried to process what had just happened. Half an hour ago, she'd been shopping for medicine and running from a bad marriage proposal. Now she was apparently joining the Alpha King's household as some kind of moral compass / attack dog / political advisor. It was insane. It was terrifying. It was a chance, a real, actual chance to matter again, to have a voice, to make the people who'd hurt her pack pay, and to stop the same thing from happening to others. She could work with that. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the market resuming its normal chaos, voices rising again now that the Alpha King had left. Life going on, business continuing, the world moving forward because that's what the world did. Aria closed her eyes and tried to remember the faces of everyone she'd lost. Her mother, her brother, all the others. Tried to hold on to the anger, the grief, the determination to make it mean something. "I'm going to fix this," she whispered to the ghosts she carried. "I'm going to make them see. I'm going to make it better." And if she had to walk into the den of the most dangerous wolf in all the territories to do it, well, she'd survived worse. Probably. The fortress materialized out of the mountain like something carved by giants in a fit of ambition. Aria had seen it from a distance once, years ago, when her mother took her on a trading run to the northern settlements. Back then it had been a distant silhouette against the sky. Impressive but abstract, the kind of thing that existed in stories more than reality. Up close, it was something else entirely. The outer walls rose 50 feet straight up from the mountainside, built from blocks of dark stone so precisely fitted that you couldn't slide a knife blade between them. Watchtowers punctuated the walls at regular intervals, each one topped with braziers that burned through the night, casting pools of orange light across the approaches. The main gate was iron-bound oak, thick enough to stop a battering ram, flanked by guards in dark armor, who watched the approaching convoy with eyes that missed nothing. Aria sat in the back of a military transport wagon, wrapped in a borrowed cloak that smelled like leather and smoke, and tried not to throw up from sheer nerves. The journey from Greystone Cross had taken most of the night. True to his word, Kael had sent a squad to collect her people from the granary, 6 soldiers in light armor, efficient and professional, who'd loaded old Magda and little Sarah onto stretchers without complaint and helped the others pack what few possessions they'd managed to salvage. The soldiers hadn't talked much, hadn't asked questions, hadn't made the kind of pitying sounds that Aria had learned to hate over the past 8 months. They'd just done their jobs with the calm competence of people who'd done this exact thing 100 times before. It should have been comforting. Instead, it made Aria feel like she was being processed, cataloged, filed away into whatever system the Alpha King used to manage the endless stream of problems flowing through his territory. First time at the fortress, Aria looked up. The woman sitting across from her was in her 40s, built like a brick wall, with scars crossing her face in a pattern that suggested she'd argued with something with very sharp claws and barely won. She wore the same dark armor as the other soldiers, but with additional markings on the shoulders that probably meant rank. "That obvious?" Aria asked. "You've got the look." The woman's smile was brief but genuine. "Everyone does, first time. Like you're waiting for the mountain to open up and swallow you whole. Is that going to happen?" "Only if you deserve it." The woman extended a hand. "Sergeant Mara Keen. I run security for the residential wings." Aria shook her hand. "Aria Thorne. I run nothing, apparently. I'm supposed to be an advisor or something." "Yeah, we heard." Mara's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Assessment, maybe. Or skepticism. "You're the one who grabbed the Alpha King in the market." Word traveled fast. "I didn't know it was him." "That's what makes it interesting." Mara leaned back against the wagon's side. "You know how many people have told the Alpha King he failed them to his face in the last decade? I'm guessing not many." "You'd be the first." Mara studied her for a moment longer, then shrugged. "Either you're brave or you're stupid. We'll find out which." The wagon rumbled through the main gate, into a courtyard that could have fit Aria's entire settlement 3 times over. More soldiers here, moving with purpose between buildings. Supply wagons being unloaded, horses being led to stables. The organized chaos of a military installation that never really slept. They rolled to a stop near a side entrance. Mara hopped down first, then offered Aria a hand. Your people are being taken to the medical wing. You'll see them tomorrow once they've been checked over and settled. Tonight, you're meeting the council. Aria's stomach dropped. Tonight? Now? The Alpha King doesn't wait. Mara started walking, and Aria had to scramble to keep up. He called a session as soon as he got back, said he had someone they needed to meet. I'm not ready. I don't know what to say. I don't know how this works. Then you'll learn fast. Mara glanced back at her. Advice? Don't try to play politics with them. You'll lose. Just say what you think and let them deal with it. That's what you're here for, right? I guess. Then guess less and walk faster. They're waiting. The fortress interior was a maze of stone corridors lit by oil lamps and iron sconces. Aria caught glimpses of rooms as they passed. Armories, storage halls, what looked like a mess hall big enough to feed an army. Because it probably did feed an army. This wasn't a castle or a palace. This was a command center, a military hub, the beating heart of an empire built on sharp edges and hard choices. They climbed stairs. Lots of stairs. By the time Mara finally stopped in front of a heavy wooden door, Aria's legs were burning and she was breathing hard. Council chamber, Mara said, try not to start a war your first night. No promises. Mara's laugh was short and sharp. Yeah, you'll fit in fine. She knocked twice, then pushed the door open. The Alpha King's guest, as requested. The room beyond was circular, with a high ceiling supported by stone pillars. A round table dominated the center, carved from a single piece of dark wood that had probably been a tree, old before Aria was born. 8 chairs surrounded it. 7 were occupied. Kyle sat at the far side, his posture relaxed but his attention absolute. He'd changed since the market. Different clothes, cleaner, but still radiating that same controlled danger. To his right sat a woman who looked to be in her 60s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, wearing robes that marked her as some kind of scholar or advisor. To his left, a man who could have been Mara's brother, all scars and muscle and tactical awareness. The others ranged around the table, younger, older, male, female, human and not quite. Pack leaders, Aria guessed, representatives from different territories. The kind of people who made decisions that affected thousands of lives and never lost a night's sleep over it. They all turned to look at her. The silence stretched like wire pulled too tight. Aria Thorne, Kyle said. His voice was calm, neutral, giving nothing away. Thank you for joining us. Please, sit. He gestured to the empty 8th chair, directly across from him. The hot seat, where everyone at the table could watch her reactions, judge her responses, catch her in every lie or hesitation. Perfect. Aria walked to the chair and sat down. Kept her back straight, her hands visible on the table, her expression neutral. She'd learned young that showing fear was an invitation to be hurt. Whatever happened in this room, she wouldn't give them that satisfaction. This is highly irregular, said one of the men at the table. Older, well-dressed, with the kind of smooth face that came from never doing manual labor. Council sessions are for territory representatives and senior advisors. She's neither. She's whatever I say she is, Counselor Drake. Kael's tone didn't change, but something cold entered it. I invited her. That makes her welcome. With all due respect, my lord, we don't know anything about this woman. She could be a spy, an infiltrator, she's a survivor from the Thornwood Pack. The silver-haired woman's voice cut through Drake's objection like a knife through butter. Small settlement, eastern borderlands, raided 8 months ago by a splinter group from the Blood Moon clan. 47 dead, settlement destroyed, 5 survivors. She looked at Aria with eyes that had probably seen every trick and con in the book. That sound about right? Yes, Aria said. And the Alpha King offered you protection, a place here, and a seat on this council. Yes. Why? The question was simple. The answer wasn't. Aria glanced at Kyle. He was watching her with that same unreadable expression, giving her nothing. No guidance, no help, no hint of what he expected her to say. This was her test then, her chance to prove she belonged here or confirm that she didn't. Because I told him the truth, Aria said. I told him he failed my pack. That his system of resource allocation left us to die while he was busy dealing with bigger problems in more important places. And instead of having me killed for disrespect, he agreed with me. The room went very quiet. You accused the Alpha King of failure. Drake's voice was carefully controlled, but Aria could hear the disbelief underneath. To his face, yes, and you're still alive. Apparently. This is absurd, another counselor said, a younger woman with pack markings on her neck that identified her as someone important. We don't need a grievance counselor sitting in on strategic planning sessions. If every pack that suffered a loss gets a voice at this table, we'll have hundreds of people. She's not here to represent her pack, Kyle said. She's here to represent perspective. The kind of perspective we lose when we spend all our time thinking in terms of territory control and resource management and political advantage. He looked at Aria. Tell them what you told me in the courtyard, about the math. Aria's throat was dry, but she pushed through. He said he makes choices every day about who to save and who to sacrifice, where to send his people, where to pull them back. He's made peace with the fact that he can't save everyone. She paused. I told him maybe he's made too much peace with it. Maybe he's gotten too comfortable with the math of letting people die. The silver-haired woman made a soft sound that might have been approval. The scarred man to Kale's left looked thoughtful. Drake looked like he'd swallowed something unpleasant. The younger woman with pack markings was frowning, but it wasn't entirely hostile. This is exactly the kind of emotional reasoning that gets people killed, Drake said. We make hard choices because we have to. Because resources are finite and threats are infinite. Bringing in someone with a personal grudge and no understanding of strategic necessity. I understand just fine, Aria interrupted. I understand that my mother died while your soldiers were somewhere else. I understand that my brother burned to death in our house because the raiders knew no one was coming to help us. I understand that when you make your calculations about acceptable losses, you're talking about real people with real lives who trusted you to protect them. Her voice was rising, and she didn't care. So yeah, maybe I'm emotional about it. Maybe I don't have your strategic overview or your years of experience. But I know what it feels like to be on the other side of your decisions, and that's something none of you have. You have no idea what we've sacrificed, the younger woman said. Her eyes were hard. What we've given up, what we've lost? You think you're the only one who's buried people? No. Aria met her gaze. I think I'm the only one in this room who's buried people because you decided we weren't worth saving. The woman's expression went cold. The Shadow Pine Pack lost half our warriors holding the Northern Pass last winter. We held it because the Alpha King asked us to, because it was strategically necessary, because if we'd fallen, the entire region would have collapsed. Don't talk to me about sacrifice when you have no idea what it costs to keep this territory functioning. Then tell me, Aria shot back. Explain it to me. Make me understand why my pack had to die so yours could live. Because right now, all I'm hearing is that some people matter more than others, and I want to know who decides that. Who makes the list? Who draws the line? I do, Kyle said. Everyone looked at him. I make the list, he continued, his voice quiet but absolute. I draw the line. Every day, every crisis, every decision. And Counselor Reed is right. He nodded to the younger woman. The Northern Pass had to hold. If Shadowpine had fallen, we'd have lost access to 3 territories and opened a route for invasion from the tribal lands. Thousands would have died. So yes, I sent them reinforcements. I prioritized them over smaller settlements like Thornwood. He turned to Aria. And you're right too. Your pack paid the price for that choice. They died because I decided saving the pass was more important than saving them. The silence in the room was suffocating. So what changes? Drake asked finally. We bring her in, let her yell at us about fairness and empathy, and then what? We still have the same problems, the same impossible choices. She doesn't make those choices any easier. No, KL agreed, but she makes sure we remember their choices, that we're choosing to let some people die. That might not change what we decide, but it should change how we think about it. He looked around the table. We've gotten efficient at triage, maybe too efficient. Maybe we've forgotten that the numbers we're calculating represent lives, families, futures. She's here to remind us. A conscience, the silver-haired woman said. There was something approving in her tone. Interesting. A liability, Drake muttered. Both, probably. Kyle said. "But I'm willing to try it. She stays. She has a voice. And when we're making decisions about resource allocation, border security, crisis response, all of it, she gets to ask the questions no one else is asking. And if she asks the wrong questions?" Reed, the younger woman, didn't look hostile anymore, just wary. "Then we tell her why they're wrong. We educate her. We argue." Kale's expression was carved from stone. "But we don't ignore her, and we don't dismiss her because she doesn't understand the strategic picture. She understands something we've forgotten, and that has value." The scarred man to Kale's left finally spoke. "What happens when her questions interfere with operational security? When knowing the details puts her at risk?" "Then we deal with it." Kale looked at Aria. "I told her I'd give her the truth. Always. Even when it's ugly. That stands." "That's dangerous," the man said. "Everything worth doing is." The discussion continued, circling around concerns and objections and practical considerations. Aria sat there and absorbed it all, trying to parse the undercurrents and power dynamics, trying to understand who mattered and who was just making noise. The silver-haired woman, someone called her Magistrate Chen, seemed to carry real weight. The scarred man was Commander Thane, head of military operations, and when he spoke, people listened. Drake was wealthy, connected, and clearly used to getting his way through political pressure. Reed was young but fierce, a rising leader from one of the stronger packs. And Kyle sat at the center of it all, steering the conversation with minimal input, letting them argue themselves to the conclusion he'd already decided on. It was masterful in its own cold way, and terrifying. Finally, the debate wound down. Kyle stood and everyone else stood with him automatically. "We'll reconvene tomorrow night, standard agenda, plus an overview of the raider situation in the Grey Hills. Commander Thane, I want options for engagement within the week." "Already working on it," Thane said. "Good. Magistrate Chen, coordinate with the medical wing. Make sure the Thornwood survivors get whatever they need. Drake, I need the trade reports from the Southern Territories by noon." He went through the list, assigning tasks, setting expectations, managing his empire with the casual efficiency of someone who'd been doing it so long it was second nature. When he finished, the counselors filed out in ones and twos, some of them casting curious glances at Aria as they passed. Reed stopped beside her chair. "You've got guts. I'll give you that." She didn't smile, but the hostility had faded. "But guts only get you so far. You want to survive here? Learn fast. Watch everything. And don't assume anyone's on your side, even when they're pretending to be." "Thanks for the warning," Aria said. "Not a warning. Advice. There's a difference." Reed walked away, leaving Aria alone at the table with Kyle. He was gathering papers, organizing them into neat stacks with movements that suggested this was routine. After a moment, he spoke without looking up. "You did well. I pissed off half your council." "Yes." Now he did look up, and there might have been amusement in his eyes. Might have been. "But you made them think. Drake's going to spend the next week trying to figure out how to discredit you. Reed's going to watch you like a hawk to see if you're a threat or an asset. Chen already likes you. She's been telling me for years that I need perspective outside the usual political circles. And Commander Thane? He thinks you're a security risk. He's probably right." DeKale finished organizing his papers and stood. "Come on, I'll show you to your quarters." They walked through the fortress in silence. The corridors were quieter now, most people having retired for what was left of the night. Their footsteps echoed off stone walls. Somewhere in the distance, Aria could hear voices, laughter, the ordinary sounds of people living their lives inside this massive stronghold. "You really meant it," she said finally, "about telling me the truth. I don't say things I don't mean, even when it hurts." "Especially then." Kale turned down another corridor. "Truth is cheap when it's easy. It only costs something when it cuts." "That's a bleak way to look at it." "I'm a bleak person." He said it matter-of-factly, like commenting on the weather. "You should know that about me if we're doing this. I'm not a good man, Aria. I'm an effective one. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "A good man tries to save everyone. An effective man saves who he can and doesn't let guilt paralyze him when he can't save the rest." He stopped in front of a wooden door, pulled a key from his pocket. "Your quarters, private room, attached bath, access to the common areas. Your people are 2 floors down in the residential wing. You can visit them tomorrow." He handed her the key. Their fingers brushed, and Aria felt that same electric awareness again. Stronger this time, like standing too close to a lightning strike. "Get some sleep," Kael said. "Tomorrow we start training you. Strategy, politics, territory law, crisis management. You wanted to understand how this works. I'll teach you." "Why?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "You could have just put me in a room somewhere, let me sit in meetings and ask my naive questions. Why actually invest time in teaching me?" Kael was quiet for a moment. When he answered, his voice was softer. "But because if you're going to be my conscience, you need to understand what you're judging. Otherwise, you're just noise." He turned to leave, then paused. "And because you remind me of someone I used to know, someone who thought I could be better than I am." "What happened to them?" "They were right. I could have been better, but I chose to be effective instead." He walked away, his footsteps fading into the darkness. "Sleep well, Aria Thorne. Tomorrow, the real work begins." Aria stood there for a long moment, key in hand, staring at the door to her new quarters, her new life, her dangerous, impossible, insane new life in the fortress of a king who just admitted he wasn't a good man. She should have been terrified, and she was, a little. But underneath the fear was something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. She opened the door and stepped inside. The room was simple, but comfortable. A bed, a desk, a wardrobe, a window overlooking the mountains. Someone had left a tray of food on the desk, still warm. Bread, cheese, some kind of stew that smelled like heaven. Her stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since the market. Aria sat down and ate mechanically, her mind still churning through everything that had happened. The council meeting, the arguments, the way Kael had defended her presence while simultaneously making it clear she was there to be uncomfortable, to push back, to make them all remember what their choices cost. She'd wanted to matter, wanted a voice, wanted the chance to make things better. Well, she had it now. The question was whether she'd survive long enough to actually use it. Aria finished eating, washed her face in the basin someone had filled, and collapsed onto the bed without bothering to undress. She was asleep within minutes, exhausted by fear and adrenaline and the sheer weight of everything that had changed in a single night. She dreamed of fire, of raiders laughing, of her mother's last words, of Marcus Vane's predator smile, of Kael's storm-gray eyes asking her if she really wanted the truth, of doors opening into darkness, of choices that couldn't be unmade, of becoming something she'd never planned to be, in a place that would either forge her into steel or grind her into dust. When she woke, the sun was streaming through her window, and someone was knocking on her door. "Rise and shine, Conscience," Mara's voice called from the hallway. "The Alpha King wants you in the strategy room in 20 minutes, and trust me, you don't want to be late." Aria groaned, rolled out of bed, and started getting ready for whatever fresh nightmare the day had in store. She had a feeling it was going to be educational. And painful. Probably both. 20 minutes turned out to be barely enough time to splash water on her face, pull her hair into something resembling order, and stumble into clothes that didn't smell like 3 days of travel and terror. Aria made it to the strategy room with maybe 30 seconds to spare, breathing hard, still adjusting the belt on borrowed pants that were slightly too long. Kael was already there, standing over a massive table covered in maps. He glanced up when she entered, took in her disheveled appearance with a single sweep of his eyes, and said nothing, just gestured to a spot beside him. Commander Thane was there too, along with 2 other military officers Aria didn't recognize. They all had that same hard-edged competence, that way of standing that suggested they could go from relaxed to lethal in a heartbeat. "The raider camp," Kael said without preamble, pointing to a spot on the map marked with a red pin. "Gray Hills, 40 miles northeast. They've been using it as a base for 3 months, hitting settlements along the eastern border. 8 confirmed raids, approximately 30 combatants, led by someone calling himself Garrick the Red." Aria stared at the map, at the red pin, at the cluster of tiny marks around it that probably represented settlements. Her settlement would have been one of those marks once, before it became ash and memory. "We move in 4 days," Thane said. His voice was gravel and iron. 2 squads. Full tactical support. We hit them at dawn, eliminate the leadership, scatter the rest. Standard suppression operation." "I want to be there," Aria said. All three officers looked at her. Thane's expression was carefully neutral. This isn't a spectator event. I know. I'm not asking to watch. I'm asking to fight. You have combat training? I can shoot. I can track. I grew up in the borderlands. Aria met his gaze. And I have more reason to want them dead than anyone else in this room. Reason isn't the same as capability, one of the other officers said. This is a military operation against experienced fighters. If you're a liability in the field, then I'll die and you'll have one less problem to worry about. Aria's voice was flat. But I'm going. The Alpha King promised me first strike. I'm collecting. Thane looked at Kael. This is a bad idea. Probably, Kael agreed. Put her through evaluation, combat, tactics, stress response. If she can keep up, she goes. If she can't, she stays here. You're serious? I gave my word. Kael's tone made it clear the discussion was over. Get her ready. 4 days. What followed was the most brutal 4 days of Aria's life. They started with weapons assessment. Turned out she could shoot. Not great. Not competition level, but good enough to hit what she aimed at more often than not. Hand-to-hand was worse. The instructor, a woman named Kira, who looked like she could break Aria in half without trying, spent 2 hours systematically demonstrating every way Aria's self-taught fighting style would get her killed. You telegraph your punches, Kira said, blocking Aria's strike so casually it was insulting. You favor your right side, you drop your guard when you're tired, and you fight angry, which makes you predictable. I have reasons to be angry. Anger's fine. Letting it control you isn't. Kira swept Aria's legs out from under her. Aria hit the mat hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. Again. They drilled and drilled and drilled. By the second day, Aria's entire body was one massive bruise. By the third day, she was starting to see patterns, starting to anticipate movements, starting to understand that fighting wasn't about rage. It was about control, precision, reading your opponent faster than they could read you. Better, Kira said on the 4th morning, after Aria managed to actually land a hit. You're still going to die if you face anyone with real training, but at least you'll make them work for it. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. Don't get emotional about it. But Kira's smile was brief and genuine. You've got guts. Just make sure you've got brains to go with them when the shooting starts. The tactical briefing happened that afternoon. Aria sat in a room with 24 soldiers while Thane laid out the operation with brutal efficiency. Approach vectors, fallback positions, rules of engagement, contingency plans if things went sideways. It was overwhelming and terrifying and exactly what she'd asked for. Questions? Thane asked when he finished. Aria raised her hand. What happens if we take prisoners? We don't. The room went quiet. Aria felt something cold settle in her stomach. What? These aren't soldiers. They're not part of a formal pack structure. They're raiders, bandits, murderers operating outside any recognized authority. Thane's voice was matter-of-fact. By territorial law, they've forfeited protection. We eliminate the threat and move on. You mean execute them? I mean eliminate them. Yes. Aria looked at Kael, who was standing near the back of the room. Is this what you meant by showing me the ugly truth? Part of it. Kael's expression was unreadable. You wanted to understand how we operate. This is how we operate. Raiders who refuse to submit to authority and continue to prey on settlements don't get trials or second chances. They get stopped. That's murder. That's survival. Kael's voice was still calm, but there was steel underneath. We don't have the resources to maintain prisons for everyone who breaks the law. We don't have a justice system that can handle a territory this size with this many competing factions. What we have is this: clear rules, harsh consequences, and the will to enforce them. It keeps most people in line. The ones it doesn't keep in line get removed from the equation. Aria wanted to argue, wanted to say this was wrong, barbaric, the kind of thing that made them no better than the raiders themselves, but she thought about her mother, about her brother, about the faces of everyone she'd lost, thought about what mercy would mean for the people these raiders would hurt next if they were allowed to continue. First strike, she said quietly. You promised me first strike. And you'll have it. Kael's eyes were dark. When we find Garrick the Red, he's yours. If you want him. I want him. Then be ready to live with it after. They left before dawn, two squads moving fast and quiet through territory Aria had never seen. The gray hills were aptly named, rolling highlands covered in gray stone and scrub brush, with visibility for miles in every direction. Good for spotting threats, bad for approaching unseen. Thane had planned for that. They came in from the north, using a river valley as cover, moving in small groups to minimize their profile. Aria stayed close to Kira, following her lead, trying to absorb everything at once. The way the soldiers communicated with hand signals, the constant awareness of sight lines and exposure, the controlled breathing, the careful foot placement, the professional calm of people who'd done this so many times, it was routine. It wasn't routine for Aria. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Her hands were slick with sweat inside her gloves. Every shadow looked like an enemy. Every sound made her want to spin and shoot. Steady, Kira whispered beside her. Control your breathing. In through your nose, out through your mouth. You start panicking now, you'll get yourself killed. Aria nodded, forced herself to breathe slower, deeper, focused on putting one foot in front of the other, on trusting the people around her to know what they were doing. The raider camp was smaller than she'd expected, a cluster of tents and crude structures nestled in a rocky hollow, with a central fire pit and what looked like supply caches scattered around the perimeter. Aria counted maybe 20 people visible, most of them still asleep or just waking up in the gray pre-dawn light. Thane signaled. The squad split, moving to surround the camp from multiple directions. Aria found herself crouched behind a boulder with Kyle on one side and Kira on the other, waiting for the signal to move. When this starts, it's going to be fast and loud, Kyle said quietly. Stay behind cover. Don't take unnecessary risks. And if I tell you to run, you run. Clear? Clear. Good. He checked his weapon with movements so smooth they looked like muscle memory. And Aria, whatever you see in there, however bad it gets, remember that these are the people who burned your home, who killed your family. Who would have killed you if you'd been there that night? Don't let guilt confuse you about what we're doing here. Before she could respond, Thane gave the signal. The world exploded into violence. The soldiers moved like a coordinated machine, flowing into the camp from three sides at once. Shots cracked through the morning air. Someone screamed. Raiders stumbled out of tents, grabbing for weapons, trying to organize a defense against an enemy that was already among them. It was chaos. Brutal, efficient chaos. Aria moved forward with the others, her rifle up, her finger on the trigger. She saw a raider turn toward her, saw the moment his eyes went wide with recognition of threat, and she fired without thinking. The shot took him in the chest. He went down hard. She'd just killed someone. There was no time to process it. Another raider, this one with an axe, charging from her left. Kira put 2 rounds in him before he got within 10 feet. The body fell with a wet thud. Keep moving! Kira shouted over the gunfire. Don't freeze up! Aria pushed forward, her training kicking in, overriding the shock and horror. She swept her rifle across her field of fire, looking for threats, looking for... There. The largest tent set back from the others. A man emerging from it, tall and broad, with red tattoos covering his arms and face. He was barking orders, trying to rally his people, trying to organize a counterattack. Garrick the Red. Something cold and focused settled over Aria. She moved toward him, using cover, keeping low, letting the chaos mask her approach. Around her, the battle continued, soldiers and raiders trading fire, close quarters combat breaking out in desperate pockets of violence. She tuned it all out, focused on the man who'd led the attack on her home. She got within 15 feet before he saw her, his eyes locked onto hers, and for a second they just stared at each other across the killing ground. Then he smiled. Well, Garrick said, his voice carrying over the noise, look what crawled out of Thornwood. Thought we got all of you. You missed a few. Aria's rifle was trained on his chest. On your knees. Make me, little wolf. He shifted his weight, hand moving toward the blade at his belt. You think you're the first survivor to come looking for revenge? You think... She shot him in the leg. Garrick went down with a roar, clutching his thigh. Blood poured between his fingers. Aria closed the distance, kicked his knife away, and pressed the barrel of her rifle against his forehead. You burned my home, she said. Her voice was shaking, but her hands were steady. You killed my mother, my brother, everyone I loved. Do you even remember them? Do you remember their faces? Or were they just another settlement, another raid, another set of bodies to loot? Garrick was breathing hard, pain and rage twisting his features. They were weak, easy prey. That's how the borderlands work, girl. You should know that. I do know that. Aria's finger tightened on the trigger. And now you're the prey. Funny how that works. Around them, the sounds of fighting were dying down. The raiders who could run were running. The ones who couldn't were being subdued or eliminated. In another minute, it would be over. Aria should have pulled the trigger, should have ended it, given herself the revenge she'd dreamed about for 8 months. But something stopped her. Why? She asked. Why my pack? We had nothing worth taking. No wealth, no strategic value. Why target us? Garrick laughed, wet and painful. Someone paid us to. Some rich bastard from the Southern Territories wanted a message sent about what happens to packs that don't play politics the right way. Your mother pissed off the wrong people, and we got paid to make an example. The world tilted. What? It was a contract job, little wolf. Business. Garrick's smile was all blood and malice. You want revenge? You're looking at the wrong people. We were just the weapon. Someone else pulled the trigger. Aria felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. All this time she'd thought it was random. Bad luck, wrong place, wrong time. But it had been deliberate, planned. Someone had paid to have her family murdered, her home destroyed, her life shattered. Who? She demanded. Who paid you? Go fuck yourself. She slammed the rifle butt into his face. Garrick's head snapped back, blood spraying from his broken nose. Who? You'll never find out from me. Aria raised the rifle to hit him again, but a hand caught her wrist. Kyle. She hadn't heard him approach. That's enough, he said quietly. He knows who ordered the hit. Someone paid him to kill my pack. I know. Kyle's grip on her wrist was gentle but immovable. And we'll find out. But not like this. If you beat him to death right now, you'll never get the information. Then what? Then we take him back to the fortress. We extract the information properly, and we deal with whoever ordered the attack. Kale looked down at Garrick with an expression that promised a very unpleasant future. Carefully, methodically, the right way. Aria wanted to argue, wanted to finish this here and now, blood for blood, justice for everything she'd lost. But Kyle was right. If Garrick died without talking, they'd never know who was really responsible. She lowered the rifle, stepped back. Let the soldiers move in to secure the prisoner. The cleanup took another hour. Final sweeps of the camp, collection of evidence, securing anything that might have intelligence value. Thane reported 12 raiders dead, 5 captured, the rest scattered into the hills. 0 casualties on their side, a clean operation. It didn't feel clean. It felt like the beginning of something much worse. They started the march back to the fortress with Garrick and the other prisoners in chains. Aria walked near the front of the column, her mind churning. Someone had ordered the attack. Someone with money and connections and reasons to want her mother dead. Which meant this wasn't over. Wasn't even close to over. You did well back there, Kyle said, falling into step beside her. Controlled. Disciplined. You could have killed him and no one would have blamed you. I should have, Aria said. He deserves it. Probably. But you made the strategic choice instead of the emotional one. That takes strength. It doesn't feel like strength. It feels like cowardice. It's not. Kyle was quiet for a moment. Revenge is easy, Aria. It's satisfying. It gives you closure. But it doesn't solve problems. If you'd killed Garrick, you'd have 1 dead raider and a mystery you could never solve. This way, we have a thread to pull. And when we follow it far enough, we'll find whoever's really responsible. And then we make them pay. Properly. In a way that sends a message to anyone else who thinks they can use raiders as hired weapons. They walked in silence for a while. The sun was rising properly now, turning the gray hills gold and red. Beautiful in its own harsh way. The kind of beauty you could only appreciate when you'd survived long enough to see it. KL, Aria said finally, when we get back, when we start pulling that thread, what are we going to find? I don't know yet. His expression was thoughtful. But whoever ordered the attack on Thornwood had resources and connections. They knew your pack's location, your defenses, your routines. That suggests someone from the Southern Territories, probably someone involved in territorial politics. He glanced at her. Your mother had enemies? Everyone has enemies. But she wasn't important enough to kill. We were nobody. Apparently not to someone. The fortress appeared in the distance, stone and strength against the mountain. Aria stared at it and felt the weight of everything settling onto her shoulders. She'd wanted answers, wanted justice, wanted to matter. Well, she was mattering now, and it was more complicated and dangerous than she'd ever imagined. They reached the fortress by mid-afternoon. The prisoners were taken to holding cells deep in the mountain. Garrick went separately, under heavy guard, to a section Aria hadn't even known existed. When she asked Thane about it, he just said, "Interrogation wing," and wouldn't elaborate. Aria went to the medical wing to check on her people. Old Magda was awake and lucid for the first time in weeks, the fever finally broken. Little Sarah's cough was better. The others looked healthier, better fed, less haunted. They were going to survive. Actually survive. Not just barely cling to life. "You did it," Magda said, gripping Aria's hand with surprising strength. "You saved us. I got lucky." Aria squeezed back. Grabbed the right stranger at the right time. Luck's just another word for courage when you're desperate enough. Magda's smile was tired but genuine. "Your mother would be proud." Would she? Aria wasn't sure. Her mother had believed in community, in working within systems, in building alliances through patience and diplomacy. She'd never believed in making deals with dangerous men or walking into the heart of power with nothing but desperation and anger. Then again, her mother was dead, and Aria was alive. And sometimes survival meant doing things the dead would never have approved of. She left the medical wing and went looking for Kael. Found him in his office, a surprisingly Spartan room dominated by a massive desk covered in reports and maps. He was reading something, frowning, making notes in the margin. "Come in," he said without looking up. "Close the door." Aria did, waited while he finished whatever he was reading. Finally, he set the paper down and looked at her. "Garrick's talking," he said. Not much yet, but enough." "What did he say?" "The contract came through an intermediary, someone operating out of the Southern Territories, specifically the Ironhaven region. Wealthy merchant class, probably with pack connections." Cale tapped the paper in front of him. "He doesn't know the actual name, but he knows the intermediary, a woman called Senna Vale. She brokers deals between people who want things done and people willing to do them." "Can we find her?" "We already know where she is. Ironhaven, running a perfectly legitimate trading house that probably serves as a front for a dozen illegal operations." Cale's smile was cold. "The question isn't, can we find her? It's how much chaos we're willing to cause to make her talk." "I don't care about chaos." "You should, because Ironhaven is Counselor Drake's territory, and if we go in hard without his approval, it's going to cause political problems we might not be able to contain." Aria felt something ugly coil in her stomach. "You're saying we need his permission to investigate who killed my pack?" "I'm saying we need to be smart about how we do it. Drake has considerable influence in the Southern Territories. If we antagonize him..." "I don't care about his influence." Aria's voice rose despite herself. "Someone paid to have my family murdered, and you're telling me we have to play politics before we can get justice?" "I'm telling you that if we move without thinking, we'll tip off whoever ordered the attack, and they'll disappear before we can touch them." Cale's tone was patient but firm. "This isn't about protecting Drake. It's about not losing our one chance to find the truth." "Then what do we do?" Cale stood, walked to the window, looked out at the mountains. "We bring it to the council, tomorrow night. Lay out what we know, what we suspect. Force Drake to either cooperate or explain why he's protecting someone in his territory who's hiring raiders. He'll just deny it, say he had no idea that his territory is too big to monitor every merchant's side business." "Probably," Kyle turned back to face her. "But it puts him on notice, and it gives us political cover to investigate. If he objects too strenuously, it makes him look complicit. If he cooperates, we get access to his territory's records and resources." It made sense. Cold, calculated, strategic sense. But Aria hated it anyway. Hated that justice had to be weighed against politics. that revenge had to wait for the right timing, that everything came down to power and leverage and who had more to lose. "I want to be there," she said. "At the council meeting, I want to hear him try to justify this." "You will be. You're counsel now, remember? Whether Drake likes it or not." Cale walked back to his desk, started organizing papers. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be difficult." Aria didn't move. "Cale, if we find out Drake was involved, if he knew about this, if he helped arrange it, what happens to him?" "That depends on what we can prove, and how much political capital we're willing to spend removing him." Cale's expression was unreadable. "Why do you ask?" "Because I need to know if you'll actually do something about it, or if he's too important, too connected, too—" "No one's too important to answer for murder." Cale's voice cut through her words like a blade. "Not even a counselor. If Drake was involved, he'll pay for it. I promise you that." "Your promises don't mean much if you can't keep them." "Then watch me keep this one." He met her eyes, and there was something fierce and absolute in his gaze. "I told you I'd give you truth. I told you I'd make the people responsible pay. I meant it. Every word." They stood there for a long moment, the air between them charged with something Aria couldn't quite name. Trust, maybe. Or the beginning of it. Or just the shared understanding that they were both too stubborn to back down once they'd committed to something. "Okay," Aria said finally. "Tomorrow then." She left the office, went back to her quarters, and tried to sleep. It didn't work. She kept seeing Garrick's bloody smile, kept hearing him say contract job, kept imagining her mother's face if she knew someone had paid for her death, like she was a problem to be eliminated instead of a person with a life and family and future. Somewhere around midnight, Aria gave up on sleep entirely. She got dressed and went walking through the fortress, letting her feet carry her without direction or purpose. Just movement, just burning off the restless energy that wouldn't let her be still. She found herself in one of the courtyards, a small garden space tucked between buildings. Someone had planted night-blooming flowers here. They glowed pale in the moonlight, releasing a scent like honey and sadness. "Can't sleep either?" Aria spun. Reed was sitting on a bench in the shadows, so still Aria had walked right past her without noticing. "Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." "You're not," Reed gestured to the bench. "Sit if you want, or don't. I'm not much for company, but I'm also not territorial about public spaces." Aria sat. They were quiet for a while, just existing in the same space, watching the night-blooming flowers move in the slight breeze. "I heard about the raid," Reed said finally. "Heard you didn't take the kill shot. Information was worth more than revenge." "Smart. Brutal, but smart." Reed was quiet for another moment. "That why you can't sleep? Processing the gap between what you wanted and what you chose?" "Among other things." Aria pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapped her arms around them. "Did you know? About raids being contract jobs? People paying to have settlements destroyed?" "I knew it happens. Not common, but not unheard of either." Reed's voice was carefully neutral. "The borderlands are violent. Sometimes that violence is random. Sometimes it's deliberate. Both kinds get people killed just as dead. My pack was deliberate. Someone wanted us gone." "Yeah, I heard that too." Reed turned to look at her. "And tomorrow you're bringing it to the council, forcing them to either help or explain why they won't. You think that's a mistake? I think it's dangerous. You're going to make enemies, powerful ones, if Drake's involved or protecting someone who is." Reed's expression was hard to read in the shadows. "But I also think it's the right move. Someone needs to push back on the idea that small packs are expendable. Might as well be you." "You don't sound convinced." "I'm convinced it needs to happen. I'm less convinced you'll survive it." Reed shrugged. "But that's not my call to make. You want to paint a target on yourself for the sake of justice. That's your choice." They sat in silence again. The flowers swayed. The moon tracked across the sky. Somewhere in the fortress, life continued. Guards, changing shifts, wolves running the perimeter, the endless machinery of empire grinding forward. "Reed," Aria said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "You can ask. I might not answer." "Why are you here? In the fortress, I mean. You're a pack leader. You could be running your own territory, making your own decisions. Why tie yourself to Kale's counsel? Reed was quiet for so long Aria thought she wasn't going to answer. Then, because I tried running things my own way, built up my pack, secured our territory, kept everyone safe, thought I was doing everything right. Her voice went flat. Then the Northern Pass situation happened. Kyle called, said he needed my warriors to hold the line or the entire region would collapse. And I sent them. Half my fighting force gone for 6 months. 23 of them didn't come back. I'm sorry. Don't be. They died doing something that mattered. Holding that pass saved thousands of lives. Reed's jaw tightened. But it broke my pack. We lost too many too fast. People started leaving, looking for stability somewhere else. Within a year, we were down to half our original size. I could barely hold the territory. So you joined the council. So I made a deal. Kyle absorbed what was left of my pack into his protection network. In exchange, I serve on the council and help run operations in the Northern Territories. Reed's smile was bitter. I gave up independence for survival. Turns out that's a trade lots of us make eventually. Do you regret it? Every day? And never? Reed stood, brushed off her pants. That's the thing about hard choices, Aria. They're hard because every option costs something. You just have to decide which cost you can live with. She started walking away, then paused. Tomorrow, when you're in that council room making your case, remember that everyone there has made trades like mine. They've all sacrificed something for survival or power or the greater good. They'll expect you to do the same. The question is whether you will. She disappeared into the shadows, leaving Aria alone with the night-blooming flowers and the weight of choices she hadn't made yet. When dawn came, Aria was ready. The council meeting was called for mid-afternoon. Aria spent the morning preparing, going over everything she knew, everything she could prove, everything she suspected. Kale had sent her copies of the preliminary interrogation reports from Garrick. They were thorough, clinical, and damning. Contract negotiated through Senna Vale, payment in advance. Target specified as Thornwood Settlement. Instructions to make it look like a standard raid, no survivors. Additional payment for proof of completion. Someone had wanted her family dead so badly, they'd paid extra to make sure the job was done right. Aria read the reports 3 times, committing every detail to memory. When the time came, she walked into the council chamber with her head high and her evidence ready. The full council was there. Drake, Reed, Chen, Thane, and 3 others, territorial representatives she'd barely spoken to, all of them watching her with varying degrees of curiosity, skepticism, or outright hostility. Kale sat in his usual position, expression neutral. Councillor Thorne has requested time to address the council. The floor is yours, Aria. Using her new title felt strange. She pushed past the discomfort and started talking. 4 days ago, we raided a camp in the Grey Hills. The target was Garrick the Red and his raiders, the same group that destroyed my settlement 8 months ago. During the operation, we captured Garrick alive. Aria kept her voice steady, professional. Under interrogation, he revealed that the attack on Thornwood wasn't random. It was a contract job. Someone paid him to destroy my pack specifically. The room was very quiet. The contract was arranged through an intermediary named Senna Vale, who operates a trading house in Ironhaven. Aria looked directly at Drake. Your territory, counselor. Drake's expression didn't change. Ironhaven is a large city with thousands of merchants. I can't be expected to monitor every business transaction. This wasn't a business transaction. It was a murder-for-hire operation. And according to the interrogation reports, Senna Vale has been operating this kind of service for years. Multiple contracts. Multiple settlements destroyed. All of it running through her trading house in the middle of your supposedly well-regulated territory. You're making very serious accusations with very little evidence, Drake said. His voice was calm, but Aria could see the calculation in his eyes. One raider's testimony under duress isn't proof of anything. For all we know, he's lying to save himself. Why would he lie about this specifically? Aria shot back. He's already admitted to the raids. Adding that they were contract jobs doesn't help him. It just expands the investigation. Or it muddies the waters. Makes this about politics instead of simple banditry. Drake leaned forward. You're trying to turn a straightforward law enforcement matter into a conspiracy because it gives your tragedy more meaning. I understand the impulse, but it's not productive. My tragedy. Aria's voice went cold. My mother was murdered. My brother burned alive. My entire pack was wiped out by people someone paid to do it. Don't you dare diminish that by calling it unproductive. Counselor Drake, Kyle said quietly, the interrogation reports are solid. We have corroborating evidence from the raider camp. Correspondence, payment records, contact protocols. This isn't speculation. Someone in Ironhaven is running a murder-for-hire network, and we need to investigate. Drake was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his tone was carefully measured. I have no objection to an investigation, but it needs to be done properly, through official channels, with respect for territorial jurisdiction. We can't just storm into Ironhaven and start arresting merchants because a captured raider told us stories. Then how do you suggest we proceed? Aria demanded. I'll send my people to look into Senevale's operations, quietly, carefully. If we find evidence of illegal activity, we'll act on it. Drake's smile was thin. But I won't have this council authorizing a heavy-handed operation in my territory based on incomplete intelligence. Your people, Aria looked at Kyle. He wants to investigate himself. The man whose territory's been hosting a murder network for years suddenly wants to handle it personally. I'm not the enemy here, Drake said, and there was real anger in his voice now. My territory has been stable, prosperous, and well-ordered for a decade. I don't appreciate having my competence questioned by someone who's been on this council for less than a week. Then prove it, Aria shot back. Open your territory to a joint investigation. Alpha King's people and yours working together. If you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Drake's eyes went hard. That's not how territorial authority works. I answer to the Alpha King, not to you. And the Alpha King is sitting right there, Aria said. So answer to him. Let him send investigators, or explain why you won't. All eyes turned to Kael. He sat perfectly still, his expression carved from stone. Aria couldn't tell what he was thinking, couldn't read whether she'd just made a brilliant move or destroyed any chance they had of getting Drake's cooperation. Then Kael spoke. Counselor Drake, I'm authorizing a joint investigation into operations in Ironhaven, specifically targeting Senevale's trading house and any associated criminal networks. You'll provide full cooperation and access to territorial records. In return, my people will work through your chain of command and respect local jurisdiction wherever possible. His voice was absolutely level. This isn't optional. Drake's face went white, then red. You're overriding my territorial authority on the word of a raider and a traumatized survivor? I'm exercising my authority as Alpha King to investigate serious crimes that cross territorial boundaries. Kael's eyes were storm gray and utterly cold. Unless you'd like to formally object, in which case, we can discuss why you're so resistant to an investigation that should be straightforward if everything's as clean as you claim. The challenge hung in the air like a blade. Drake held Kael's gaze for a long, tense moment, then he looked away. Of course, my lord. Ironhaven's resources are at your disposal. Good. Kyle turned to Thane. Assemble a team. I want them in Ironhaven within 3 days. Already on it, Thane said. The meeting continued, moving on to other business, but Aria barely heard it. Her heart was pounding, adrenaline singing through her veins. She'd done it. She'd forced the issue, pushed past Drake's resistance, gotten authorization for the investigation. But as the council adjourned and people filed out, she caught the look Drake gave her. It was brief, carefully controlled, but unmistakable. She'd made an enemy, a powerful, connected, dangerous enemy who would remember this moment and look for ways to make her pay for it. Aria met his gaze and didn't look away. Let him remember. Let him plot. She'd survived worse. Probably. Outside the council chamber, Kael caught her arm. That was reckless. It worked. This time. But you've painted a target on yourself. Drake's going to come after you now, and he's patient enough to wait for the perfect moment. But Kael's grip was gentle, but his voice was serious. Are you ready for that? I didn't come here to be safe, Aria said. I came here to matter, to make a difference. If that means making enemies, then I'll make enemies. Brave words. Kael released her arm. Let's see if you still believe them when those enemies start pushing back. He walked away, leaving Aria standing alone in the corridor, trying to process what she'd just done. She'd declared war. Maybe not openly, maybe not violently, but she'd drawn a line and dared Drake to cross it. And men like Drake always crossed those lines, always found ways to hurt the people who challenged them. Aria should have been terrified. Instead, she felt alive. More alive than she had in months. Like she'd finally stopped just surviving and started actually fighting for something. It was probably going to get her killed, but at least she'd die standing up. The thought should have been morbid. Instead, it carried her through the next 3 days with something that felt almost like momentum. Aria threw herself into preparation for the Ironhaven investigation, working with Thane's team to review intelligence reports, map out Senevale's known associates, and identify potential leverage points. She slept maybe 4 hours a night, fueled by coffee that tasted like burnt dirt and a burning need to see this through. On the second day, Kael found her in the archives at 2 a.m, surrounded by territorial tax records and shipping manifests. "You're going to burn yourself out," he said from the doorway. Aria didn't look up. "I'm fine. You're running on fumes and spite. That's not sustainable. It's worked so far." She made a note in the margin of a manifest. "Did you know Senevale's trading house handles shipments for half the merchants in Ironhaven? And most of those shipments go through checkpoints that Drake's people are supposed to monitor?" "I did know that, yes." "And you never thought that was suspicious?" Kael walked into the room, pulled out a chair, and sat down across from her. Ironhaven is the largest trading hub in the Southern Territories. Every major merchant operates through networks that cross multiple checkpoints. Some of those networks are legitimate, some aren't. Telling the difference requires evidence, not suspicion. We have evidence now. We have a raider's confession and circumstantial connections. That's not the same thing as proof that would hold up in any kind of formal proceeding. Kael leaned back in his chair. "Which is why we're investigating, to find that proof." Aria finally looked up from the records. Kael looked tired too, she realized. Not physically tired, he probably ran on even less sleep than she did, but there was something worn in his expression. Something that suggested he'd been carrying weight for so long, he'd forgotten what it felt like to put it down. "You think Drake's involved," she said. "Don't you?" "I think Drake benefits from a certain amount of controlled chaos in his territory. Keeps people dependent on his stability, his connections, his ability to navigate complicated situations." Kael's voice was careful. "Whether he's directly involved in Senevale's operations or just conveniently blind to them, I can't say yet. But either way, he's not going to make this easy." "Good." Aria turned back to her records. "I don't trust easy anymore." Kael was quiet for a moment. Then, "Aria, when we get to Ironhaven, when we start pulling on these threads, things are going to get dangerous. Not just physically, politically. People with power don't like being exposed. They push back, and they push back hard. You already warned me about making enemies. I'm not warning you. I'm making sure you understand what you've committed to." Kael's eyes were serious. "You can still walk away from this. Let Thane's team handle the investigation. Stay here, safe, and wait for results." "No. You didn't even think about it." "I don't need to think about it." Aria met his gaze. "My mother died because someone decided she was inconvenient. My pack burned because someone with money and connections wanted us gone. I'm not staying safe while other people clean up the mess. I'm going to Ironhaven. I'm going to look Senevale in the eye. And I'm going to find out who paid to have my family murdered." Kael studied her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. It wasn't his usual cold smile. This one had something warmer in it, something that might have been pride. "All right then," he said. "Get some sleep. We leave at dawn." "We? You didn't think I'd let you do this without me, did you?" Kael stood, headed for the door. "Besides, I want to see Senevale's face when she realizes the Alpha King is personally involved in her investigation. That should be entertaining." He left. Aria sat there for another few minutes, staring at the records without really seeing them, trying to process the fact that Kael was coming to Ironhaven. The Alpha King himself, leaving the fortress, traveling to Drake's territory, personally overseeing an investigation that could explode into a full political crisis, because she'd asked him to help find justice for a pack of nobodies. Either he was the best manipulator she'd ever met, or he actually cared. Aria wasn't sure which possibility scared her more. The journey to Ironhaven took 2 days. They traveled with a small escort, Thane, Kira, and 6 soldiers, keeping a low profile, avoiding main roads. Kael wanted to arrive quietly, before word could spread that the Alpha King was coming. The element of surprise, he said, would make people careless. They reached the city just after sunset on the second day. Ironhaven sprawled across a river delta, all stone buildings and busy docks, and the kind of organized chaos that came from people making money hand over fist. Even at this hour, the streets were crowded with merchants, laborers, wolves in human form, and those who preferred their other shapes. The air smelled like salt water, cooking meat, and opportunity. Kael had arranged for them to stay at a small inn near the merchant district. Nothing fancy, nothing that would draw attention. Just clean rooms and a proprietor who knew when to mind his own business. Senna Vale's trading house is 3 blocks east, Thane said, spreading a map across the table in Kael's room. Large building, central location, very visible. She's got maybe a dozen people working there on any given day. Clerks, guards, runners. We've been watching it for the past week. Regular business hours, nothing obviously suspicious. Except for the part where she arranges murders, Aria said. Except for that, yes. Thane's smile was brief. We move tomorrow morning, early, while they're still setting up for the day. Less time for word to spread, less chance for anyone to run. What about Drake's people? Kael asked. They've been cooperative. Thane's tone suggested that cooperation had required some persuasion. They're providing a perimeter but staying out of the actual operation. Drake himself is supposedly attending some merchant council meeting across the city. How convenient. Kael's expression was unreadable. All right, we go in fast, secure the premises, seize records, and bring Senna Vale in for questioning. Standard procedure, minimal force, unless they resist. And if she runs? Aria asked. Then we catch her. Kael looked at her. You stay behind me. Clear? I'm not a child. No, you're an untrained civilian with a personal stake in this investigation, which makes you a liability in a tactical situation. His voice was firm but not unkind. I brought you because you deserve to be here. But I'm not going to let you get killed trying to prove something. Aria wanted to argue, but he was right, and they both knew it. She'd done well in the raider camp, but that had been a military operation with clear roles and established protocols. This was going to be messier, more improvised, more dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with combat. Fine, she said. I'll stay behind you. Good. Kael stood. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be long. Aria tried to sleep, managed maybe 3 hours of restless unconsciousness before giving up and spending the rest of the night staring at the ceiling, running through scenarios, imagining confrontations, trying to prepare herself for whatever was coming. When dawn broke, she was ready. They moved through the streets in the gray pre-dawn light, 6 soldiers in civilian clothes, Kael in a dark coat with the hood pulled up, Aria trying to look like she belonged. The trading house was exactly where Thane had said it would be, a 3-story stone building with Senna Vale's name carved into a wooden sign above the door. Thane positioned his people at the exits. Kael approached the front door, tried the handle. Locked. He knocked, sharp and authoritative. A moment later, someone opened the door. A young man, maybe 20, with the look of a clerk who'd been dragged out of bed too early. His eyes went wide when he saw Kael. Alpha King, he stammered. We weren't expecting... No, I imagine not. Kael walked past him into the building. Aria and the others followed. Where's Senna Vale? Upstairs, in her office. But she doesn't usually see anyone before... She'll see me. Kael headed for the stairs without waiting for permission. Lock the doors. No one leaves until I say otherwise. The clerk scrambled to comply. Aria climbed the stairs behind Kael, her heart hammering. This was it. The moment she'd been building toward for 8 months. The person who'd arranged her mother's death was somewhere in this building. They reached the 2nd floor, a hallway with several doors, most of them closed. Kael went to the largest one, didn't bother knocking, just opened it and walked in. The office beyond was expensively furnished, polished wood desk, shelves lined with ledgers, a window overlooking the street, and behind the desk, a woman looked up with an expression that started as irritation and rapidly shifted to something closer to panic. Senna Vale was in her 40s, handsome in a sharp-edged way, dressed for business in clothes that spoke of wealth without flaunting it. She stood quickly as they entered, composing her features into something approaching calm. "Alpha King," she said. Her voice was steady, professional. "This is unexpected. If you'd sent word, You would have disappeared," Kyle finished. "Like you've disappeared every other time someone's gotten close to investigating your operations." Senna's expression didn't change, but Aria saw her eyes flick toward the window, calculating, measuring distances, looking for exits. "I run a legitimate trading business," Senna said carefully. "If you have concerns about my operations, I'm happy to provide documentation. Save it." Kale moved to stand in front of the desk. "We have Garrick the Red in custody. He's told us everything. The contracts, the payments, the way you broker deals between people who want problems eliminated and people willing to eliminate them." "I have no idea what you're talking about." "The Thornwood Pack." Aria's voice cut through the room like a knife. 8 months ago, 47 people dead. You arranged it." Senna's eyes finally shifted to Aria, really looked at her. And for just a second, something flickered in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or calculation. "I've arranged hundreds of trades over the years," Senna said. "I can't be expected to remember every—" "A woman named Elena Thorne." Aria stepped forward, and Kyle didn't stop her. "She ran a small pack in the eastern borderlands. Someone wanted her dead, wanted her entire settlement burned, and they paid you to make it happen." "I don't know anyone by that name." "Liar." Aria's hands were shaking, and she clenched them into fists to hide it. "You brokered the contract. You took the payment. You sent raiders to murder my family while they slept. And you did it for money." "I run a trading house," Senna repeated. "That's all. If someone's told you otherwise, they're mistaken." "Then you won't mind if we examine your records," Kyle said. "All of them, including the ones you keep off the official books." Senna's jaw tightened. "You have no authority to—" "I have absolute authority." Kale's voice dropped to something cold and terrible. "I'm the Alpha King. This is my territory. And you're going to cooperate, or you're going to find out exactly how unpleasant I can make your life." For a long moment, Senna just stared at him. Aria could see the calculation happening behind her eyes, the weighing of options, the measuring of risks. Then Senna's shoulders dropped slightly. Not surrender, exactly, but acceptance that this particular fight was lost. "There's a safe," she said quietly. "Behind the bookshelf, the records you want are there." Thane moved to the bookshelf, found the hidden panel, opened the safe. He pulled out a stack of ledgers, started paging through them. His expression went cold. "Payment records," he said. "Dates, amounts, contract descriptions. This is—" He looked at Kyle. "This is everything. Years of this. Dozens of contracts." "Find Thornwood," Kale said. Thane flipped pages. Found it. 8 months ago, payment received for Territorial Adjustment Eastern Borderlands. Client listed as... He stopped. Went very still. "What?" Aria demanded. "Who paid for it?" Thane looked at Kyle. Something passed between them. Something dark and heavy. "It's a code," Thane said carefully. "A merchant designation. Southern Territories, high-tier client." He paused. "It matches the coding system used by Drake's territorial administration." The room went silent. "That doesn't mean Drake himself," Senna said quickly. "That code gets used by dozens of merchants who operate through his territory systems. It could be any—" "Show me the full client list," Kyle said. His voice was absolutely level, but Aria could hear the fury underneath. "Every contract you've arranged using that code." Senna hesitated. Then slowly, she pulled out another ledger, handed it over. Kale read it. His face didn't change, but something in his posture went rigid. When he looked up, his eyes were storm-dark and utterly cold. 13 contracts, he said quietly, all using Drake's administrative codes, all targeting small packs in contested border regions, all arranged over the past 3 years. "That doesn't prove he was involved," Senna said. "Someone could have stolen the codes, used them without authorization." "Stop!" Kale's voice cut through her words like a blade. "You're under arrest for murder for hire, conspiracy, and about 24 other charges I haven't decided on yet. Thane, take her into custody. Seize everything. Records, correspondence, payment documentation, all of it. Soldiers moved in. Senna didn't resist. She just stood there, looking at Kyle with an expression that might have been resignation or relief. You know he'll deny it, she said as they bound her hands. Drake. He'll say he had no idea, that his codes were compromised, that I'm lying to save myself. And without proof linking him directly to the payments, I'll find the proof, Kale said. And then I'll deal with him. They took Senna away. Aria stood in the office, staring at the ledgers spread across the desk, trying to process what they'd just learned. Drake. It had been Drake all along, or someone working through Drake's systems with his knowledge. Either way, it led back to the same place.
Aria. Kale's voice pulled her back to the present. We need to move. This is going to spread fast, and when Drake finds out we've arrested Senna, he'll run, Aria finished. Or attack, or both. Exactly. Kale was already gathering the ledgers, securing them. We take this evidence back to the fortress. We convene a formal council inquiry. We do this by the law, even if Drake doesn't deserve it. And if he doesn't come quietly, then we make him. Kale met her eyes. But, this has to be done right, Aria. If we move against a counselor without absolute proof, it could fracture the entire territorial alliance. We need to be careful. Aria wanted to scream that she was tired of being careful, that Drake had murdered her family and deserved to pay immediately, brutally, without the luxury of formal proceedings. But she understood what Kale was saying. This wasn't just about justice for the Thornwood Pack anymore.
It was about whether the rule of law meant anything at all. They left the trading house with the evidence secured, Senavale in chains, and a political crisis building like a storm on the horizon. The return journey to the fortress took 2 days, but it felt like a week. Every moment Aria expected Drake's people to appear, to attack, to try to stop them from reaching safety with the evidence that could destroy him. But the attack never came. They made it back to the fortress without incident, which somehow made Aria more nervous, not less. Kale called an emergency council session the night they returned. All counselors, all senior advisors, all territory representatives. The chamber was packed with people who'd heard rumors and wanted answers. Drake was there. Sitting in his usual seat, expression calm, looking like a man with absolutely nothing to hide. Kyle didn't waste time on preamble. 3 days ago, we arrested Senna Vale of Ironhaven on charges of murder for hire. During the arrest, we seized records documenting 13 contracts over 3 years, contracts to eliminate small packs in contested border regions. All 13 contracts were arranged using administrative codes tied to the Southern Territories. Specifically, codes issued through Counselor Drake's territorial office. The room erupted, people shouting questions, demanding clarification, calling for order. Kale waited it out with perfect calm until the noise died down. Counselor Drake, he said, do you have anything to say? Drake stood slowly. He looked around the room, making eye contact with different counselors, playing to his audience. When he spoke, his voice was strong and clear. I categorically deny any involvement in these alleged contracts. My administrative codes are used by hundreds of merchants throughout the Southern Territories. If someone abused those codes for illegal purposes, that's a security failure I take responsibility for. But it doesn't make me complicit in crimes I had no knowledge of. Convenient, Aria said. She stood too, ignoring the looks. You run one of the most tightly controlled territories in the system. You monitor trade, track shipments, regulate merchant activity down to the smallest detail. But somehow, someone used your codes for over a dozen murder contracts, and you never noticed? The Southern Territories process thousands of transactions every month, Drake shot back. I can't personally review every, but you can personally benefit when small packs disappear from contested regions? Aria's voice was rising. When the chaos creates opportunities for your preferred merchants to expand. When territorial disputes get resolved in ways that favor your political allies. You're making wild accusations based on circumstantial evidence and the word of a career criminal, Drake said. His voice was calm, but Aria could see the anger in his eyes. I understand you're emotional about this. Your pack was destroyed, and you want someone to blame. But that doesn't give you the right to fabricate conspiracies. Show them the ledgers, Aria said to Kyle. Show everyone what we found. Kael gestured. Thane brought forward the records they'd seized, started distributing copies to the council. Aria watched as people read, as expressions shifted from skepticism to shock to cold calculation. "These are serious allegations," Magistrate Chen said finally. She was reading one of the ledgers, frowning. "But Counselor Drake is right that administrative codes can be compromised. Without direct evidence linking him to the payments or the contract arrangements, then we find that evidence," Aria interrupted. "We audit his territory's financial records. We interview his staff. We track the payment chains. If he's innocent, the investigation will prove it. If he's not, you've already decided I'm guilty," Drake said. His calm was cracking now, real anger bleeding through. "This entire proceeding is a witch hunt orchestrated by someone with a personal vendetta and enabled by an alpha king who's too blinded by—" He stopped himself, but the implication hung in the air. "By what?" Kael's voice was soft, dangerous. "Finish your thought, Counselor." Drake's jaw tightened. "By personal feelings that have no place in governance. You've let this woman manipulate you, my lord. She's using her tragedy to push a political agenda, and you're allowing it because she's right." Kael stood. The room went silent. "She's right that we've been too comfortable with acceptable losses. Right that we've let people die because they weren't strategically important. Right that the system we've built favors the powerful and discards the weak. And yes, right to question whether you're the kind of man who would exploit that system for personal gain." "This is unprecedented," someone muttered. "Good," Kael said. "Maybe we need unprecedented. Maybe we need to be questioned. Maybe we need someone who doesn't care about political consequences or territorial alliances to stand up and demand actual justice instead of convenient compromises." He looked at Aria, and something passed between them. Understanding? Maybe. Or recognition. The acknowledgement that they'd crossed a line together and there was no going back. "Full investigation," Kael said, turning back to the council. "Counselor Drake's territorial finances, administrative records, personal correspondence, all of it. Magistrate Chen, you'll oversee the process to ensure impartiality. Commander Thane will provide tactical support. And Counselor Thorne," he nodded to Aria, "will have full access to participate and review findings." "You can't be serious," Drake said. "I'm entirely serious." Kael's voice was cold iron. "You'll cooperate fully. If you're innocent, you have nothing to fear. If you're not—" He left the threat hanging. Drake stood there, visibly controlling his fury, looking around the room for support. Some counselors met his eyes. Others looked away. The calculations were happening in real time. Finally, Drake nodded stiffly. "Of course, my lord. I'll cooperate fully. I have nothing to hide." "Good." Kael gestured dismissal. "We're adjourned. Investigation begins tomorrow." People filed out slowly, whispering, clustering in groups to discuss what had just happened. Aria stood near the table, trying to process the fact that she'd just watched Kael publicly challenge one of his most powerful counselors, had watched him choose her side over political convenience, had watched him admit, in front of everyone, that she'd changed the way he thought about governing. Reed stopped beside her on the way out. "That was either brilliant or suicidal," she said quietly. "Possibly both." "Story of my life lately," Aria said. "Yeah." Reed's smile was brief. "But you're still alive. That counts for something." She walked away, leaving Aria alone in the chamber with Kael and Thane. "He's going to fight this," Thane said to Kael. "Drag it out. Obstruct at every opportunity. Use every political connection he has to muddy the waters." "Let him," Kael said. "We have the evidence. We have Senevale's testimony. And now we have council authorization for a full investigation. He can fight all he wants. It won't save him." "Unless it does," Aria said. Both men looked at her. "Unless his connections are strong enough to bury this. Unless he finds a way to make the evidence disappear or discredit our sources or—" "He won't," Kael said. His voice was absolute. "Because I'm not going to let him. I promised you justice, Aria. I'm keeping that promise." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that power and influence and careful investigation would actually lead to accountability. But she'd seen too much of how the world worked, seen how easily the powerful protected their own. "What if the investigation clears him?" she asked. "What if we can't prove he was directly involved?" Kael was quiet for a moment. When he answered, his voice was softer. Then we accept that the system failed. That sometimes, even with evidence and authority and righteous anger, the guilty go free because we can't prove what we know is true. He met her eyes. But we don't stop trying. We don't accept that failure is inevitable. We keep pushing, keep investigating, keep demanding better. Because the moment we stop believing justice is possible is the moment we've truly lost. It wasn't the reassurance Aria wanted, but it was honest. And honesty, she was learning, was worth more than empty promises. Over the next week, the investigation consumed everything. Teams of auditors descended on Drake's territorial records. Witnesses were interviewed. Financial transactions were traced. Senna Vale was questioned extensively, providing details that corroborated the pattern of contracts and payments. And slowly, piece by piece, the evidence mounted. Drake had been careful. He'd never put his name directly on anything, never made explicit orders, but the pattern was unmistakable. Contracts targeting specific packs, payments moving through shell companies he controlled, administrative codes issued to merchants who just happened to benefit when those packs disappeared. It was circumstantial. Damning, but circumstantial. Until they found the letters. Hidden in a secondary office Drake maintained in Iron Haven, buried in records he'd assumed no one would ever see, were 3 years of correspondence. Coded language, careful phrasing, but clear enough in context. Instructions on which packs to target, approval of contract terms, discussions of political benefits and territorial advantages. Drake had orchestrated the whole thing. When Magistrate Chen presented the findings to the full council, the room was silent. Even Drake's allies couldn't defend him against this. The evidence was too clear, too comprehensive, too damning. Drake himself sat in his chair, face pale, hands clenched on the table. When Kael asked if he had anything to say, Drake just shook his head. "Counselor Drake," Kael said formally, "you are hereby stripped of your position, your territorial authority, and your seat on this council. You will be held pending formal charges and trial for conspiracy to commit murder, abuse of administrative authority, and violation of territorial law." Soldiers moved in. Drake didn't resist. He just stood, let them bind his hands, and walked out of the council chamber with his back straight and his expression blank. It was over. Actually over. The man who'd ordered her mother's death was going to face justice. Aria should have felt triumphant, vindicated, victorious. Instead, she just felt tired. That night, she found herself back in the garden courtyard, sitting on the same bench where she'd talked with Reed weeks ago. The night-blooming flowers were in full bloom, filling the air with their honey-sadness scent. "You did it." Aria looked up. Kael was standing at the courtyard entrance, watching her. "We did it," she corrected. "I couldn't have gotten this far without—" "Yes, you could have." Kael walked over, sat down beside her. "You grabbed my arm in a market and demanded help. You told me I'd failed your pack. You pushed back against the council, challenged Drake publicly, refused to back down even when it would have been safer." He was quiet for a moment. "You changed things, Aria. Not just this case. The way the council thinks. The questions they ask. The standard they hold themselves to. That's all you. I just wanted justice for my family. And you got it. But you also got something bigger. You reminded us that the people we govern are actually people, that they matter, that their lives have value beyond strategic calculations." Kael's voice was soft. "I needed that reminder. We all did." They sat in silence for a while, just existing in the same space, breathing the same flower-scented air. "What happens now?" Aria asked finally. "Drake goes to trial. Senna Vale testifies. We use this as a precedent to crack down on similar operations throughout the territories." Kael's expression was thoughtful. "And you stay on the council. Keep asking hard questions. Keep pushing us to be better." "Is that an order?" "It's a request." He looked at her, and there was something vulnerable in his eyes. Something that hadn't been there before. "I told you once that you reminded me of someone who thought I could be better than I am. Someone who was right. But I chose to be effective instead." He paused. "I don't want to make that choice anymore. I want to try being both. And I need you here to make sure I actually follow through." Aria's throat was tight. That's a lot of pressure to put on one person. "I know, but I think you can handle it." Kael's smile was small but genuine. You've handled everything else I've thrown at you. Barely. Barely's good enough. Barely means you survived. Survived means you get to try again tomorrow. He stood, offered her his hand. Come on. The council's holding a formal session tomorrow to announce Drake's arrest and establish new oversight protocols. You should probably get some sleep before that. Aria took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. For a moment, they just stood there, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, see the tiredness around his eyes, recognize the weight he carried every single day. Thank you, she said quietly, for keeping your promise, for actually giving me justice instead of just words. Thank you for forcing me to remember why justice matters in the first place. Kael released her hand, stepped back. Get some sleep, Aria Thorne. Tomorrow, we start building something better. He walked away, disappearing into the fortress shadows. Aria stood in the garden for another moment, breathing in the night-blooming flowers, feeling the weight of everything that had changed. She'd come here desperate and broken, with nothing but grief and anger. Now she had purpose, had a voice, had proven that even the smallest survivor could stand up to power and win. It wasn't the ending she'd expected when she grabbed a stranger's arm in a crowded market, but it was a beginning she could live with. The words echoed in Aria's mind as she walked back to her quarters that night. A beginning. After 8 months of endings, of loss and grief and barely surviving, she finally had something that felt like forward motion, like the possibility of building instead of just enduring. She slept better that night than she had in months. No nightmares of fire, no dreams of her mother's last moments. Just deep, dreamless darkness. And when she woke to morning light streaming through her window, she felt something she'd almost forgotten: hope. The formal council session was scheduled for mid-morning. Aria dressed carefully, choosing clothes that Reed had helped her select from the fortress stores. Simple, but well-made. The kind of thing that said she belonged here without trying too hard to prove it. She looked at herself in the small mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She'd gained weight since arriving at the fortress. Good weight, from regular meals and training. Her face had lost that hollow, haunted look. Her eyes were clearer. She looked like someone who'd survived. More than that, someone who'd fought back and won. The council chamber was packed when she arrived. Not just counselors and advisors, but territorial representatives, pack leaders, senior military officers. Everyone who mattered in the Alpha King's administration gathered to witness what came next. Kyle stood at the head of the table, waiting for people to settle. When the room finally quieted, he began. 3 weeks ago, Counselor Aria Thorne brought evidence of a murder-for-hire network operating within our territories. That evidence led to the arrest of Senna Vale and a comprehensive investigation into administrative corruption in the Southern Territories. His voice carried clearly through the chamber. Today, I'm announcing the results of that investigation and the actions we're taking in response. He nodded to Magistrate Chen, who stood with a stack of documents. Our investigation uncovered a pattern of systematic abuse spanning 3 years, Chen said. Her voice was crisp, professional. Former Counselor Drake used his administrative authority to arrange contracts targeting small packs in contested border regions. 13 confirmed cases, 47 deaths in the Thornwood attack alone. Total casualties across all contracts, 163. The number hit the room like a physical blow. People shifted, whispered, exchanged horrified looks. 163. That was more than just Aria's pack. That was entire communities, wiped out because they'd been inconvenient to someone's political plans. Drake has been charged with conspiracy to commit murder, abuse of authority, and territorial corruption, Chen continued. He will stand trial in accordance with territorial law. Additionally, we're implementing immediate reforms to prevent similar abuses. She went through the list. New oversight for administrative codes, independent auditing of territorial finances, protection protocols for small packs in border regions, a formal appeals process for communities requesting emergency assistance. It was comprehensive, detailed, the kind of structural change that usually took years to implement. They were doing it in weeks, because Aria had refused to accept that her pack's destruction was just bad luck. These reforms are necessary, Kael said when Chen finished. But they're not sufficient. We also need to address the underlying problem, the mindset that allowed this to happen in the first place. He paused,
and Aria saw him take a breath like he was about to step off a cliff. For too long, I've governed based on strategic necessity, on calculations about who to save and who to sacrifice, on the belief that effective leadership meant making hard choices without letting emotion interfere. The room was absolutely silent. I was wrong, Kyle said. The words landed like thunder. Not wrong to make hard choices. Those are inevitable. But wrong to make them without considering the human cost. Wrong to treat people as numbers in an equation. Wrong to accept that some lives matter less than others just because they're less strategically important. Aria's throat was tight. She hadn't expected this. Hadn't expected him to actually admit failure, publicly, in front of everyone who depended on his strength and certainty. Counselor Thorne forced me to confront that failure, Kyle continued. She stood in this chamber and accused me of letting her pack die because they weren't worth saving. And she was right. I made that calculation. I chose to prioritize other crises, other territories, other concerns. And 163 people paid the price for my strategic efficiency. Someone in the back of the room made a sound. Aria couldn't tell if it was approval or shock. This council exists to govern 7 territories and countless packs, Kyle said. That's an impossible job. We will always face situations where we can't save everyone, where we have to choose between bad options and worse ones. But we can choose to face those situations with our eyes open, with full awareness of what our choices cost and who pays the price. We can choose to be accountable. He looked directly at Aria. That's what Counselor Thorne has given us. Accountability. The willingness to stand up and say, this isn't good enough. We can do better. And the courage to keep pushing until we actually do better, even when it's difficult and uncomfortable and politically dangerous. Kale turned back to the room. Effective today, I'm establishing a new council position, advocate for territorial welfare. The role is to represent the interests of small packs and border communities, the people who usually don't have a voice in strategic discussions. To ask the questions no one else is asking, to make sure we never again treat casualties as acceptable losses without acknowledging what we're accepting. He paused. Counselor Thorne has agreed to serve in this role. The room erupted. Not in protest exactly, more like a release of tension that had been building. People talking over each other, debating, questioning. Aria heard fragments, unprecedented, necessary, about time, dangerous precedent. Reed was smiling. Chen looked satisfied. Commander Thane's expression was carefully neutral, but Aria thought she saw approval in his eyes. And in the back corner, she saw Marcus Vane, the man she'd been running from in the market all those weeks ago. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Not hostile exactly, maybe respectful, maybe just wary. Their eyes met. Marcus nodded once, slowly. Then he looked away. Message received. She wasn't prey anymore. Kale let the discussion run for a few minutes, then raised his hand for silence. We have other business to address. Commander Thane? Thane stood. Military operations update. The raider problem in the Grey Hills has been eliminated. We've also moved forces to border regions identified as high risk in the investigation. Protection details are now assigned to 12 settlements that previously had no formal security. Resource allocation? Kyle asked. We're redirecting supplies from the Central Reserve. It'll strain our emergency capacity in the short term, but Magistrate Chen assures me the Southern Territories can absorb the cost once Drake's seized assets are liquidated. Correct, Chen confirmed. Drake's personal wealth is substantial, more than enough to fund protection details and infrastructure improvements in the affected regions. Aria felt something fierce and satisfied bloom in her chest. Drake's money, the wealth he'd accumulated while orchestrating murders, was going to be used to protect the very communities he'd tried to destroy. That felt like justice in a way that no trial verdict could match. The session continued for another hour, working through logistics and implementation details. Aria contributed when it was relevant, mostly listening and learning, watching how these powerful people negotiated, compromised, pushed back on each other while still working toward shared goals. It was messier than she'd expected, more human, less the efficient machine she'd imagined, and more a group of flawed individuals trying to solve impossible problems with finite resources. When the session finally adjourned, people approached her, some to offer congratulations, some to ask questions about the new advocate role.
Some just to look at her like she was a curiosity, this nobody from a destroyed pack who'd somehow ended up with real power. Reed waited until the others had dispersed. You realize you've painted an even bigger target on yourself now, right? Every counselor who doesn't like being questioned. Every pack leader who thinks their interests should come first. Every person who benefits from the old way of doing things, they're all going to see you as a threat. I know, Aria said. And you're okay with that? I'm alive with it. That's close enough. Reed's laugh was sharp and genuine. Yeah, I think you're going to be fine. She clapped Aria on the shoulder and walked away. Kale caught her attention from across the room, gestured toward the door. Aria followed him out, down familiar corridors, up to the fortress ramparts where the wind blew cold and clean off the mountains. You didn't tell me you were creating a new council position, Aria said when they were alone. I didn't decide until last night. Kale leaned against the stone wall, looking out at the territories spread below them. After we talked in the garden, I realized this can't just be about investigating one corrupt counselor. It has to be about changing the system. And that requires someone who'll keep pushing for that change even when I'm tempted to slide back into old patterns. You think you'll slide back? I think it's easy to forget lessons when they're inconvenient. Easy to justify strategic choices when you're not the one paying the cost. He looked at her. You won't let me forget. That's why you're perfect for this role. I'm not perfect for anything. I'm just stubborn. Stubborn is good. Stubborn keeps people honest. Kale's smile was small but real. Besides, you've already proven you can stand up to power. Now you just have to do it professionally, with institutional backing and a formal title. That sounds exhausting. It is. Welcome to governance. They stood there for a while, watching the sun track across the sky, not talking, just being present. Aria thought about how far she'd come since that night in the market. How many impossible things had happened. How many times she'd been sure she was going to die or fail or break, and somehow she'd survived instead. My pack is leaving, she said eventually. Old Magda, little Sarah, the others. They're heading west to the coastal territories. Reed offered them a place in her community. How do you feel about that? Relieved. They deserve to build new lives somewhere safe, somewhere they're not constantly reminded of what they lost. Aria's voice was quiet. I thought I'd go with them. Start over somewhere new. But you have work to do here. Yeah. She turned to face him. Is that stupid? Choosing to stay in a place where half the council probably wants me dead, doing a job I'm completely unqualified for, just because I think I can make a difference? No, Kyle said. That's courage. That's exactly the kind of courage that changes things. I'm not courageous. I'm just... Stop. Kale's voice was firm but gentle. You grabbed my arm in a market full of people who could have helped you, but you chose me, a complete stranger, a dangerous one. You took that risk because you had to, because you were out of options. That's courage. Then you stood in a council chamber and accused me of failure. You pushed back against Drake even when it would have been safer to stay quiet. You went to Ironhaven. You refused to settle for convenient answers. He paused. None of that was safe or smart or strategic. All of it was brave. Aria felt tears burning in her eyes and hated herself for it. I was just trying to survive. Survival is brave too, especially the kind of survival that refuses to accept that being alive is enough, the kind that demands meaning, purpose, justice. Kale's expression was serious. You didn't have to do any of this. You could have taken the protection I offered, kept your head down, lived quietly in the fortress while other people fought your battles. But you didn't. You chose to fight. That matters. Does it? Really? Aria's voice cracked. Drake's in custody. The reforms are happening. The system's changing. Would it have happened without me? Or would you have gotten there eventually anyway? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I would have. Maybe someone else would have forced the issue. Maybe we would have kept sliding toward corruption and convenient compromises until the whole structure collapsed. Kale turned to face her fully. But you're the one who actually did it. You're the one who stood up when it mattered. That's not theoretical. That's real. And it changed everything. The tears spilled over. Aria wiped at them furiously, embarrassed. Sorry, I don't usually... Don't apologize. Kael's hand found her shoulder, steady and warm. You've earned the right to feel things, to acknowledge what you've accomplished, to grieve what it cost. It cost my family, Aria said. The words came out broken. They died for nothing, for someone's political convenience, and I can't bring them back. I can only make sure it doesn't happen again, but that doesn't fix anything. It doesn't make them less dead. No, Kael agreed quietly. It doesn't. Justice doesn't resurrect the dead or undo trauma. It just stops the bleeding and maybe prevents the next wound. That's all we can do. Stop the bleeding, prevent the next wound, try to be better than we were yesterday. Aria leaned into his hand on her shoulder, letting herself take comfort from the contact, from the solid presence of someone who'd kept his promises, who'd actually listened when she screamed into the void and demanded to be heard. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not killing me when I grabbed your arm." Kael's laugh was soft. "Thank you for grabbing it, for demanding I pay attention, for refusing to let me hide behind strategic necessity." They stood like that for a long moment, the Alpha King and the survivor, finding unexpected connection in the space between power and grief. Then Kael stepped back, professional distance reasserting itself. "Come on," he said. "We have work to do. The advocate for territorial welfare needs an office, staff, resources. And you need to start learning how to use institutional power instead of just righteous anger. Can I use both? Probably more effective if you do." Kael's smile was genuine. "But let's start with getting you an actual desk that's not in the archives." The next weeks were a blur of activity, setting up the advocate office, hiring staff, establishing protocols for how small PACs could request assistance or appeal council decisions. Aria worked 18-hour days learning on the fly, making mistakes and fixing them, slowly building something that looked like an actual institutional function instead of just her yelling at people. Drake's trial happened quickly. The evidence was overwhelming. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to life imprisonment in the fortress's secure detention wing. No execution. Kael said the territories had seen enough death, and keeping Drake alive sent a message that the law applied to everyone, even former counselors. Aria attended the sentencing, watched Drake stand before the court, stripped of power and position, facing the consequences of his choices. He looked at her once, briefly. She couldn't read his expression, didn't care to try. When the guards led him away, Aria felt something release in her chest. Not satisfaction, exactly. Not closure. There was no such thing as closure for what she'd lost, but acknowledgement. The system had worked. Justice had been served. The powerful had been held accountable. It was something. Small, imperfect, incomplete. But something. 3 months after Drake's sentencing, Aria stood in a rebuilt settlement in the eastern borderlands. Not Thornwood. That place was ash and ghosts, and it would stay that way. But a new settlement, on new ground, built with resources from Drake's seized assets and protected by soldiers assigned through the new security protocols. 30 families had moved in. Survivors from destroyed PACs, refugees from border conflicts, people looking for a fresh start in a place that promised actual protection instead of empty words. They'd named it New Growth. A little on the nose, maybe, but Aria understood the appeal. Sometimes you needed the symbolism to believe in the possibility. She walked through the settlement with the new PAC leader, a woman named Sarah, who'd lost her own community to raiders 2 years ago. They discussed security arrangements, supply lines, communication protocols, all the practical details that would help New Growth survive its vulnerable early months. "We heard what you did," Sarah said as they toured the defensive perimeter. "How you stood up to the council, made them actually pay attention to people like us. I just asked questions that needed asking. You did more than that. You changed things." Sarah's smile was tired but hopeful. "My daughter's going to grow up here, safe, protected, with actual support from the Alpha King's administration instead of just being forgotten until it's too late. That's because of you." Aria's throat was tight. "It's because of a lot of people. The system's changing, but it took work from—" "It took you being brave enough to start," Sarah interrupted gently. "The rest matters too. But it started with you." When Aria returned to the fortress that evening, she found Kael waiting in her office. He was reading one of her reports, frowning slightly. "You're recommending we extend protection details to 6 more settlements," he said without preamble. "That's going to strain military resources." I know, but they meet the criteria. High-risk locations, minimal defenses, no political connections to request help through normal channels. Aria sat down behind her desk. An actual desk now, in an actual office with windows and everything. If we're serious about preventing another Thornwood, we have to commit resources even when it's inconvenient. I'm not disagreeing, just noting the cost. Kyle set down the report. We'll make it work. Thane's already shifting assignments. Thank you. Don't thank me. This is literally your job now, making sure I follow through on commitments instead of finding strategic reasons to delay them. He smiled slightly. You're very good at it, by the way. Annoying, but good. I'll take that as a compliment. You should. Kale stood, walked to the window, looked out at the mountains. I heard about new growth, how it's progressing. Sarah's doing well. They'll be stable within 6 months if we maintain current support levels. Good. Kale was quiet for a moment. You know, when you first grabbed my arm in that market, I thought you were just another person in crisis. Someone who needed help, who'd move on once they got it. I didn't expect you to stay, to build something, to actually change how we govern. I didn't expect any of this either, Aria admitted. I just wanted to not die. Everything else kind of spiraled from there. Best kind of spiral. Kale turned to face her. I'm glad you grabbed my arm, Aria Thorne. Glad you demanded I pay attention. Glad you refused to accept that your pack's destruction was just the cost of strategic efficiency. I'm glad you listened. That you actually did something instead of just offering empty sympathy. They looked at each other across the office. So much had changed since that night in the market. The desperate grab, the dangerous gamble. The moment when a nobody survivor had grabbed the Alpha King's arm and set in motion a chain of events that transformed an empire. There's something I need to tell you, Kael said. His voice had gone serious. About that night. About why I played along when you grabbed me. Aria's heart picked up. Okay. I was in that market because I was tired. Tired of the fortress, of constant demands, of being the Alpha King every second of every day. I wanted one night where I could just walk through a crowd and be nobody. He paused. And then you grabbed my arm, didn't know who I was, didn't care, just saw someone who might help and took the chance. It was refreshing, to be chosen for no reason except that I was there. You could have walked away, let Marcus handle me however he wanted. I could have, probably should have. Kale's smile was slight. But something about the way you grabbed me, like I was a lifeline in a storm, it reminded me why I took this job in the first place. Not for power or control, but to actually help people who needed it. And you're saying I reminded you of that? One desperate grab in a market? One desperate grab from someone who refused to accept that needing help made them weak. Who demanded better and kept demanding it even when it would have been easier to give up. Kael's eyes were serious. Yeah, that reminded me, and I'm grateful for it. Aria felt something warm and complicated bloom in her chest. Not quite trust. She'd learned too much about power and politics to trust completely, but something close to it. Partnership, maybe. The recognition that they were both trying to do impossible things and somehow managing not to fail completely. We're going to keep pushing, aren't we? She said. Keep reforming, keep questioning, keep making the powerful uncomfortable until they actually do better. Absolutely. Kael's smile was fierce. Think you can handle it? I grabbed the Alpha King in a crowded market and lived to tell the tale, Aria said. I think I can handle some uncomfortable counselors. Good. Kael headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Aria? That thing you said once? About me being too comfortable with the math of letting people die? Yeah? You were right, but I'm working on being less comfortable with it. So if you catch me sliding back into old patterns, you have my permission to grab my arm again, metaphorically speaking. I'll hold you to that. I'm counting on it. He left. Aria sat in her office for a while longer, looking at the reports on her desk, the maps on her walls, the lists of settlements requesting assistance and packs needing protection. So much work still to do, so many people who needed help, so many ways the system could still fail. But also progress, real, measurable progress. Settlements protected. Reforms implemented, a corrupt counselor held accountable, a system that was slowly, painfully, learning to value all lives instead of just strategically important ones. It wasn't perfect. It was messy and complicated and would probably always be a struggle, but it was better than it had been, and Aria had helped make it better. 6 months later, on the anniversary of Thornwood's destruction, Aria stood in the fortress garden with the night-blooming flowers. She'd brought a candle, just a small one, nothing elaborate, lit it in the darkness and stood there remembering. Her mother's laugh, her brother's terrible jokes, old Magda's stories, little Sarah's cough, all the faces and voices and moments that had been stolen by someone's casual cruelty. "I did it," she whispered to the ghost she carried. "I made them pay. I made the system better. I gave you justice, even if it came too late." The wind moved through the flowers. The candle flame flickered but didn't go out. Footsteps behind her. Aria didn't turn around. She knew the sound of Kael's walk by now. "Every year?" he asked quietly. "Every year," she confirmed, "for as long as I'm alive to remember them." "Good." Kael stood beside her in the darkness. "They deserve to be remembered. All of them. Every life lost to violence or neglect or strategic necessity. We should carry that weight. It's heavy. It's supposed to be. The moment it stops being heavy is the moment we've lost our humanity." They stood together in silence, watching the candle burn. Two people who'd met by accident and changed each other's worlds through a combination of desperate courage and unlikely trust. The Alpha King and the Advocate. Power and accountability. Strategy and conscience. "You know what I think about sometimes?" Aria said eventually. "What would have happened if I'd grabbed someone else's arm that night? If you hadn't been standing in exactly the right place at exactly the right moment? You'd probably be dead," Kael said bluntly, "or married to Marcus Vane. Either way, not great." "Yeah," Aria smiled slightly, "but also, none of this would have happened. The reforms, the advocate position, holding Drake accountable, all of it came from one random grab in a market. Not random. You chose to fight back, to take a risk, to demand help instead of accepting defeat." Kael's voice was serious. "Everything that came after, that's just the consequence of that choice, of refusing to be a victim. I was absolutely a victim. My pack was destroyed. My family was murdered. And you could have let that define you, let it be the end of your story, but instead you made it the beginning of something new, something better." Kael looked at her. "That's not diminishing what you lost. It's acknowledging what you built with what remained." The candle burned lower. The flowers swayed in the wind. The fortress stood solid against the mountain, sheltering thousands of lives, serving as the heart of an empire that was slowly learning to value compassion alongside strength. "I miss them," Aria said quietly. "Every day. I miss them." "I know. But I'm glad I'm here. Glad I grabbed your arm. Glad I stayed to fight instead of running to something safer." She wiped at her eyes. "Is that wrong? To be glad about anything that came from their deaths?" "No," Kael said firmly. "They'd want you to live, to build, to make their deaths mean something beyond just tragedy. Honoring them doesn't mean being miserable forever. It means using what they taught you to make the world better." My mother would have hated all of this. The politics, the power plays, the compromising with people she didn't trust. But she would have loved that you're protecting other small packs, that you're giving people like her a voice. Kael's smile was gentle. "She raised someone brave enough to grab an Alpha King and demand better. That's worth being proud of." The candle finally guttered out. Aria left it there in the garden, a small memorial among the night-blooming flowers. She and Kael walked back toward the fortress together, shoulders nearly touching, comfortable in the silence. At the entrance, Kael paused. "Tomorrow's council session. We're discussing expansion of the protection protocols to the Western Territories. Drake's allies are going to push back hard." "Let them push," Aria said. "We'll push harder." "That's the spirit." Kael's grin was fierce and genuine. "Get some sleep, Advocate Thorn. Tomorrow we continue changing the world. One uncomfortable question at a time." "Exactly." Aria watched him disappear into the fortress, then stood for a moment looking up at the stars. So much had changed. So much remained the same. She was still grieving, still angry, still carrying the weight of everything she'd lost. But she was also fighting, building, making a difference that would outlast her pain. What had started as a desperate grab in a frontier market had become a turning point for an entire territory. A moment when the powerless demanded to be heard and the powerful actually listened. When strategic efficiency met human compassion and discovered they could coexist. Not perfectly, never perfectly, but better. Always, relentlessly, better. Aria Thorne, survivor, advocate, the woman who'd grabbed an alpha king and changed an empire, walked into the fortress with her head high and her purpose clear. Tomorrow, there would be more fights, more challenges, more powerful people who needed to be reminded that small lives mattered. Tomorrow, she would face them all. But tonight, she rested. Carried her ghosts with love instead of just grief. Acknowledged that survival wasn't just staying alive, it was finding reasons to keep living. And she had reasons now. So many reasons. The fortress doors closed behind her, the night-blooming flowers swayed in the mountain wind. And somewhere in the eastern borderlands, in a settlement called New Growth, children slept safe under protection that wouldn't have existed if one desperate woman hadn't been brave enough to grab a stranger's arm and demand help. One grab, one gamble, one refusal to accept that being powerless meant being silent. That was all it took to change everything.